The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. For thousands of years, the Jedi had believed themselves the sole guardians of this mystical power, the only ones who could bend reality through will and training. They were wrong. Because on a forgotten Separatist research station orbiting the junk world of Raxus Prime, something impossible was about to awaken, beings who wielded power without midichlorians, who shaped the universe through genetic evolution rather than ancient mysticism. The X-Men were about to discover that the galaxy far, far away had no idea what a mutant was. And the Clone Wars were about to become infinitely more complicated. Charles Xavier's eyes snapped open to darkness and the acrid smell of burning circuits. His telepathic senses immediately recoiled from the overwhelming wrongness of his surroundings. Thousands of minds surrounded him, but they felt mechanical, artificial, wrong. And beyond them, in the vast emptiness outside whatever structure contained him, there was nothing. The constant background hum of human consciousness that had defined his entire existence was simply absent, replaced by an eerie psychic void punctuated by scattered points of alien mental architecture. "Logan," Charles whispered, his voice hoarse. "Logan, wake up." A feral growl answered him from the darkness, followed by the distinctive snick of adamantium claws extending. "Where the hell are we, Chuck? And why do I smell burnt plastic and motor oil?" Emergency lighting flickered to life across the cylindrical chamber, revealing the rest of the X-Men scattered across a medical bay that looked like nothing from Earth. Jean Grey stood on a levitating platform, her red hair splayed across strange metallic surfaces. Scott Summers was already sitting up, his ruby quartz visor intact but his tactical uniform torn and scorched. Storm floated inches above her platform, unconscious but already generating small static discharges that made the lights flicker. Beast hung suspended in some kind of stasis field, his blue fur matted with an unknown substance. And Rogue lay curled against the far wall, her gloved hands clutching her head. But it was Magneto who stood already awake at the chamber's viewport, his cape somehow pristine despite whatever had brought them here. Eric Lensher gazed out at a vista of twisted metal and broken starships that stretched to a rust-colored horizon, and beyond that, stars. Stars that formed no constellation Charles had ever known. "We're not on Earth anymore, Charles," Magneto said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of terrible certainty. "Those stars. I've memorized every major constellation visible from both hemispheres. These formations are completely alien." "Impossible," Beast groaned, the stasis field releasing him with a hiss of depressurizing gas. Hank McCoy landed gracefully despite his disorientation, his scientific mind already analyzing their surroundings. Spatial displacement of this magnitude would require energy expenditure exceeding. He froze, staring at a wall panel covered in symbols that were definitely not any Earth language. "Oh my stars and garters." Jean's eyes opened, and immediately her telekinetic power lashed out reflexively, sending medical equipment flying. "Charles. I can't feel Earth. The Phoenix Force is screaming something about dimensional barriers and," her words cut off as she truly saw their surroundings for the first time. Scott was on his feet instantly, moving to Jean's side while his tactical mind catalogued every exit and potential threat. "Professor, situation report. What's the last thing anyone remembers?" Charles closed his eyes, reaching back through fragmented memories. "The Shi'ar Observatory. We were investigating that energy signature they detected, something about a cosmic phenomenon intersecting with Earth's dimensional coordinates." His telepathic senses expanded cautiously, probing beyond their immediate chamber. What he found made his breath catch. Dear God. There are thousands of them out there. Artificial minds. Mechanical beings with rudimentary consciousness. And beyond them. Scott, we're on some kind of space station. Space station? Rogue pulled herself upright, her southern accent thickening with stress. Sugar, we don't have space stations that look like this. And I can feel something wrong with my powers. Like there's some kinda energy in the air that's making everything tingle. Storm's eyes opened, crackling with white light as her claustrophobia triggered an immediate weather response. The atmospheric controls in the chamber went haywire as localized whine began howling through the medical bay. Where is the sky? I cannot feel the winds, cannot sense the storm patterns. This place is a cage of metal and... Ororo, focus. Charles projected calm telepathically, helping Storm regain control before her panic destroyed their only apparent shelter. We're all disoriented, but we must remain rational. Rational? Wolverine's claws retracted as he moved to the viewport beside Magneto, his enhanced senses cataloging 100 unfamiliar scents and sounds. Chuck, I got 3 centuries of memories and not one of them includes stars arranged like that. We ain't just off-world. We're off everything. A klaxon suddenly blared throughout the station, a harsh, mechanical wailing that set everyone's teeth on edge. Red emergency lighting bathed the medical bay in crimson shadows. And through the viewport, Charles saw movement among the twisted metal canyons of the junk planet below. Hundreds of pinprick lights rising from the surface like a swarm of angry insects. Movement detected in restricted medical wing, a mechanical voice announced in a language none of them should have understood, yet somehow did. Specimens have escaped containment. Authorization, extermination protocol engaged. Battle droids deploying. Specimens. Jean's telekinetic aura flared with indignation. Someone was experimenting on us. The chamber's entrance suddenly exploded inward with a shower of sparks and molten metal. Through the smoke strode 3 skeletal figures that looked like walking nightmares, humanoid robots with insectoid heads, carrying weapons that crackled with energy. Their optical sensors locked onto the X-Men with cold mechanical precision. Intruders will be terminated, the lead droid announced, its vocabulator emotionless. Resistance is futile. Cyclops' hand moved to his visor. X-Men, I don't know where we are, but I know what we do. We survive. Magneto smiled, a cold expression that promised violence. His hands rose, and every metal surface in the chamber began to vibrate with barely contained power. Charles, I believe these machines are about to learn why Homo Superior doesn't need your precious force. The droids opened fire, and the Star Wars galaxy's first encounter with mutant kind began in blood, metal, and powers that would make even the Jedi Council question everything they thought they knew about the nature of power itself. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The battle droids never stood a chance. Magneto's eyes blazed with fury as he thrust both hands forward, and the 3 skeletal machines simply tore apart. Limbs ripped from torsos, blaster rifles crumpled like paper, and optical sensors shattered as Eric Lencher demonstrated why he was called the Master of Magnetism. The droids' remains hung suspended in mid-air for one perfect moment before Magneto flung them back through the destroyed entrance with enough force to demolish the corridor beyond. Fascinating, Beast muttered, already examining one of the twisted blaster rifles. The metallurgical composition is completely alien. This alloy doesn't match anything in Earth's periodic table, yet Eric's powers manipulated it effortlessly. Which suggests his mutation operates on fundamental electromagnetic principles rather than recognition of specific Earth metals. Save the science lesson, Hank, Wolverine growled, his claws extending again as more mechanical footsteps echoed through the station. We got company, and lots of it. Charles Xavier's telepathic senses painted a terrifying picture. Hundreds of those artificial minds were converging on their position, a mechanical army responding to the destruction of their advanced scouts. But something else caught his attention, something far more disturbing. Beneath the station, on the planet's surface, he detected organic minds. Scattered. Frightened. Imprisoned. There are people down there, Charles said urgently. Beings held in cages, subjected to experiments. Whatever this facility is, it's not just a prison, it's a laboratory. Then we shut it down. Cyclops' tactical mind was already formulating a plan. Jean, Storm, can you sense any way off this station? Hangar bays, escape pods, anything? Jean Grey's telekinesis swept outward, mapping the station's layout through the movement of air and metal. There's a massive chamber 3 levels down. I'm sensing dozens of small craft, but the design is completely foreign. And Scott, her voice tightened with concern. I'm also sensing something else. An energy field that permeates everything here. It's not the Phoenix Force, but it's similar. Ancient. Alive. The Force, Storm whispered, and somehow she knew the word was right. The weather goddess could feel it now, not wind or rain or lightning, but something that connected all living things, a current in the cosmic storm that she'd never perceived before. There is a power here that predates our understanding. It flows through everything. Rogue pressed herself against the wall as another squad of battle droids appeared at the far end of the corridor. Suga, we can philosophize later. Right now we need to move before we're scrap metal like these robots. Cyclops didn't hesitate. Beast, Wolverine, take point. Storm, create cover. Jean, stay with the professor. Magneto, he paused, because giving Eric Lencher orders was always a calculated risk. Do what you do best. Magneto's smile was predatory. Oh, I intend to, Cyclops. These machines chose the wrong species to cage. They moved as a unit, decades of training and combat experience overriding their disorientation. Wolverine led the charge with Beast at his side, feral rage and acrobatic genius carved through the first wave of droids like a hot knife through butter. Logan's adamantium claws sheared through metal that was never designed to withstand Earth's hardest substance, while Hank's superhuman agility turned the corridor into a three-dimensional battlefield where ceiling and walls became launching points for devastating attacks. Storm raised her hands and the station's atmospheric systems went haywire. Localized cyclones formed in the corridors, slamming droids against walls with bone-breaking force that shattered their mechanical frames. Lightning arced from her fingertips, not the cosmic power she commanded in Earth's atmosphere, but still enough to overload the droid circuitry and leave them sparking ruins. Jean Grey surrounded Charles Xavier in a telekinetic bubble, lifting him and his wheelchair through the chaos while simultaneously turning droid weapons back on their wielders. Blaster bolts, she understood now that's what they were, ricocheted wildly as Jean's telekinesis caught them mid-flight and redirected them with surgical precision. But it was Magneto who truly demonstrated the nightmare the X-Men represented to this galaxy's technology-dependent warfare. Eric Lencher stood in the center of the corridor like a conductor before an orchestra of destruction. His powers reached out through the station's metal infrastructure, and everywhere he touched, chaos erupted. Blast doors sealed shut, trapping droid reinforcements. Support beams twisted, creating barriers and choke points. And the droids themselves, oh, the droids learned true helplessness. Magneto didn't just destroy them. He took control, turning entire squads into puppets that fired on their own allies or simply tore themselves apart at his mental command. This galaxy builds everything from metal, Magneto called out, his voice carrying over the sounds of carnage. Starships. Weapons. Even their soldiers. They've handed me an empire on a silver platter. Eric, focus. Charles projected telepathically. We need to reach that hangar bay, not conquer the station. They fought their way through 3 more levels, and with each battle, the X-Men learned more about their new reality. The droids communicated through some kind of centralized network. Charles could feel the artificial intelligence coordinating their attacks. The weapons fired superheated plasma rather than bullets. And the station itself was enormous, a sprawling complex that must have housed hundreds of workers before whatever catastrophe had left it in droid hands. Finally, they burst into the hangar bay Jean had sensed, and stopped dead at the sight before them. Dozens of spacecraft filled the massive chamber, but they looked nothing like Earth's shuttles or experimental space planes. These were sleek fighters and angular transports, their hulls covered in alien script and unfamiliar design elements. Some were streamlined and elegant. Others were purely functional, all harsh angles and exposed systems. And every single one of them was completely alien. How are we supposed to fly these? Rogue asked, staring at the nearest craft, a wedge-shaped fighter with wings that apparently folded for landing. Beast was already at the nearest ship's access panel, his genius mind analyzing the control interface. The language is unfamiliar, but the basic principles of aeronautics should translate. Thrust, lift, navigation, physics is physics regardless of the galaxy. His furry fingers danced across the controls, and impossibly, the ship's systems began powering up. Fascinating. The interface is responding to tactile input and, oh my. These craft are designed for faster-than-light travel. The energy requirements alone suggest technology centuries beyond Earth's capabilities. Or we've traveled to Earth's future, Jean suggested quietly, her telekinesis lifting several smaller ships to clear a path to the larger transports. No, Charles Xavier's voice was heavy with certainty. His telepathic range had been expanding since they'd awakened, adapting to this new reality. And what he sensed in the minds of those imprisoned beings on the planet below confirmed his worst fears. We haven't moved through time, Jean. We've moved through space. Or perhaps, dimensions. These beings have never heard of Earth. Never conceived of a planet called Earth. Their entire frame of reference is different. An explosion rocked the hangar as battle droids finally breached the entrance. But this time, they weren't alone. Through the smoke strode a different kind of machine, taller, broader, with a more sophisticated design. And floating beside them came spherical droids crackling with electrical energy. The lead droid's optical sensors glowed red as it raised a more substantial weapon than the others had carried. Hostile organisms, it announced in that same emotionless tone. Republic forces have been alerted to your presence. Surrender is your only option. Republic? Cyclops' tactical mind seized on the word. There's a government here. An organized civilization. And they're coming to investigate, Storm added, her weather senses detecting something massive approaching through the upper atmosphere. I feel ships. Large ones. Descending toward this station. Magneto's hands rose again, and the advanced droids began to disintegrate under his assault. Then we leave. Now. Charles, can any of these craft get us to the surface? Xavier's telepathy reached out, touching the imprisoned minds below. One mind stood out, older, wiser, with fragments of knowledge that included ships and piloting and, yes. But Eric, those beings below, we can't simply abandon them. We're not, Wolverine said flatly, already climbing into one of the larger transports. We're gonna need intel about this place. And people who've been locked up in here might be real motivated to talk. Jean guided Xavier's wheelchair into the transport, her telekinesis securing him safely. The others piled in, Beast frantically studying the control panels, Storm trying to sense the atmospheric conditions beyond the station, Rogue looking distinctly uncomfortable in the enclosed space. Cyclops took the pilot's seat despite having no idea how to fly this craft. His visor scanned the controls, his tactical mind trying to decipher the alien interface through pure logic. Beast, I'm going to need a crash course. Literally. Just press the glowing symbols and pray, Hank suggested unhelpfully, his own hands flying across the console. Ah. This appears to be the ignition sequence. And this, yes, this is thrust control. Rather intuitive design, actually. The creators of these craft assumed pilots would need simple, combat-ready interfaces. The transport's engines roared to life with a sound like thunder. The hangar doors ahead remained sealed, until Magneto casually ripped them apart with a gesture, exposing the rust-colored landscape of Raxus Prime below and the infinite stars beyond. X-Men, Charles Xavier said quietly, his telepathic voice touching each of their minds as the transport lifted from the deck. We're about to enter a galaxy at war. A galaxy that has never seen mutants. Whatever happens next, we face it together. The transport shot through the torn hangar doors and dove toward the junk planet's surface, leaving the Separatist research station and its army of confused droids behind. Above them, massive wedge-shaped warships emerged from hyperspace, Republic Venator-class star destroyers responding to the distress signal. And aboard the lead destroyer, 2 Jedi Knights felt a disturbance in the Force unlike anything they'd experienced before. Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi exchanged glances, hands moving instinctively to their lightsabers. Something impossible had just arrived in their galaxy. And the Clone Wars would never be the same. The transport screamed through Raxus Prime's polluted atmosphere, trailing fire and smoke as Beast wrestled with controls designed for pilots who'd spent their entire lives in this galaxy. Mountains of twisted metal and discarded starship hulls rose around them like the bones of dead giants, and somewhere in that technological graveyard, Charles Xavier sensed the minds he'd detected from the station, closer now, frightened but alive. There. Jean's telekinesis guided Cyclops' vision toward a partially intact structure embedded in a canyon of compressed scrap. I'm sensing life signs. Dozens of them. They're weak, malnourished, but conscious. Storm pressed against the viewport, her claustrophobia barely contained despite the open sky beyond the transparisteel. Scott, those ships above us, they are changing course. Descending. We have minutes at most before they arrive. Through the Force he didn't yet understand, Charles felt those ships as well. And aboard them, minds unlike anything he'd encountered. Disciplined. Serene. Connected to that same living energy Jean and Storm had sensed on the station. But beneath that serenity lay steel. These were warriors, trained and deadly despite their philosophical calm. Wolverine sniffed the air recycling through the transport systems. Place smells like a junkyard mated with a chemical plant. I'm gettin' heavy metals, exotic compounds, and something that smells like burnt ozone. Tibanna gas residue, Beast said absently, somehow having already partially deciphered the transport's database during their short flight. It's used in plasma-based weapons throughout this galaxy. Also, we appear to have stumbled into what these people call the Outer Rim, essentially the galactic frontier, far from centralized authority. And this particular world, Raxus Prime, serves as a dumping ground for the Separatist Alliance's military-industrial complex. Magneto turned from where he'd been studying the distant warships. Separatist. Republic. These terms suggest civil war. We've arrived in the middle of someone else's conflict, Charles. Then we stay neutral, Xavier replied firmly. We have no stake in this galaxy's politics. Our priority is survival and finding a way home. If there is a way home, Jean said quietly, and her words hung heavy in the transport's cramped cabin. The landing was controlled chaos. Beast brought them down hard on a relatively flat section of compressed hull plating, the transport's landing gear shrieking in protest. Before the engines had fully powered down, Wolverine was already at the access ramp, claws extended, every predatory instinct screaming danger. They emerged into a landscape that looked like Hell's own recycling center. The sky was a sickly orange-brown, thick with particulates that made Storm physically recoil. Towers of discarded technology stretched to the horizon, broken battle droids, shattered starfighters, and pieces of vessels so massive their purpose was incomprehensible. And everywhere, the smell of decay and rust and forgotten machines. The structure is this way, Charles projected, his telepathy guiding them through the maze of metal. Quickly now. Those ships will be in weapons range soon. They found the entrance half buried under a collapsed transport, a reinforced door bearing symbols that Magneto's power tore open like tinfoil. Beyond lay darkness and the stench of unwashed bodies and despair. Charles's wheelchair navigated the debris-strewn corridor through Jean's telekinetic assistance, while Cyclops provided illumination with carefully controlled optic blasts that left glowing marks on the walls. The cells were crude but effective, energy barriers containing beings of species none of the X-Men had ever imagined. A tall humanoid with blue skin and red eyes. A being that looked like a mobile pile of rocks. A female with tentacles where hair should be. And dozens more, all staring at the X-Men with expressions ranging from terror to desperate hope. What are you? The blue-skinned humanoid asked in that same language they somehow understood. His mental signature marked him as intelligent, calculating, and deeply frightened. Are you Jedi? Have the Republic finally found us? Charles Xavier projected calm and reassurance as he approached the energy barrier. We're not Jedi. We're travelers. From very far away. What happened here? Why were you imprisoned? The being's laugh was bitter. We're Force-sensitive. The Separatists were trying to create their own Force wielders to counter the Jedi. They gathered us from across the Outer Rim, untrained, desperate people whose midi-chlorian counts marked them as potential weapons. Their experiments failed. We were scheduled for termination when the station's AI malfunctioned. Force-sensitive. Beast's analytical mind latched onto the term. You're referring to that energy field we've been sensing. It's genetic. Measurable through some kind of cellular count. You don't know what the Force is? A female prisoner with orange skin and white markings spoke up, her voice incredulous. What kind of beings are you? Magneto had heard enough. His power reached out and simply deactivated every energy barrier in the facility simultaneously. We're the kind who don't leave people in cages. Can any of you pilot that transport outside? The blue-skinned man, he identified himself as Tol Skor, a failed Jedi initiate from Pantora, nodded eagerly. Yes. But those Republic ships, they'll shoot us down the moment we lift off. The Separatists use this facility for illegal experiments. The Republic won't care who's aboard, they'll destroy it to eliminate the evidence. Let them try, Storm said, her eyes already glowing white with building power. The atmosphere responded to her will, dark clouds forming impossibly fast above them despite Raxus Prime's polluted skies. I have ended droughts and stopped hurricanes. Their ships will find the sky itself has turned against them. But Charles was focused on something else. His telepathy had reached upward, touching the minds aboard those descending warships. And what he found made his blood run cold. They have soldiers up there. Thousands of them. Identical minds, clones, I think. And leading them, two individuals whose thoughts are focused, disciplined, and absolutely certain they're doing the right thing by investigating this facility. Clones. Rogue's southern accent thickened with disgust. They're using clones as soldiers. That's messed up even by our standards. Wolverine's enhanced hearing picked up the sound first, the scream of atmospheric entry vehicles cutting through Raxus Prime's toxic air. Companies here. Multiple contacts, coming in fast. They had perhaps 3 minutes to get everyone aboard the transport. The freed prisoners moved with the desperate speed of people who'd accepted they were already dead and suddenly found themselves given a reprieve. Tol Skor immediately headed for the pilot's controls, his hands moving across the interface with practiced familiarity. There are more, one of the prisoners said urgently. 2 levels down. A Wookiee, a Twi'lek child, and others. The Separatists kept them separate, they showed the most potential for Force manipulation. Jean exchanged glances with Cyclops. Scott's tactical mind was already calculating odds and time constraints. Professor, we don't have. We're not leaving anyone behind, Charles said firmly. Jean, Storm, with me. The rest of you, secure the transport and prepare for immediate departure. Magneto blocked their path, his cape billowing despite the still air. Charles, this is foolish. We don't know these people. We don't understand this galaxy's politics. And we certainly don't owe them anything. Eric, they're prisoners scheduled for execution. Does that sound familiar to you? Charles's telepathic voice carried the weight of shared history, concentration camps, mutant internment facilities, the endless persecution both men had fought against their entire lives. For a moment, Magneto's expression darkened with old pain. Then he nodded curtly. 5 minutes. Then we leave with or without them. Charles, Jean, and Storm descended into the facility's depths while above them, Republic gunships settled onto the scrap-strewn landscape. Armored soldiers in white plastoid armor disembarked in perfect formation, clone troopers, Charles realized, sensing their eerily identical mental patterns. And with them came two figures in earth-toned robes, each carrying a cylindrical weapon at their belt. The Jedi had arrived. Anakin Skywalker was young, perhaps mid-20s, with an arrogance that leaked through his disciplined mental shields. His connection to that Force energy was immense. Charles had never sensed anything quite like it. Beside him, Obi-Wan Kenobi radiated calm authority and deeply buried grief. Both men were scanning the facility with senses Charles was only beginning to understand. "I sense something unusual here, Master," Anakin said, his hand resting on his lightsaber. "Not Force-sensitive exactly, but different. Like the Force is bending around something it can't quite touch." Obi-Wan stroked his beard thoughtfully. The reports indicated multiple life signs evacuating a Separatist research facility. But these readings are contradictory. Some of these beings register as Force-sensitive, others as complete voids, and still others as something in between. He turned to the clone commander. "Cody, have your men surround the transport. Non-lethal measures if possible. We need to understand what happened here." Inside the facility's lowest level, Charles Xavier found what remained of the Separatists' most prized captives. The Wookiee, a massive being covered in brown fur who roared with relief at their arrival, immediately cradled a small humanoid child with tentacles growing from her head. The Twi'lek, Tolskor had called them. Her large eyes were filled with tears as Jean's telekinesis lifted her gently. "It's okay," Jean whispered, her empathy naturally extending to the frightened child. "We're going to get you out of here." Storm was helping an elderly being who looked almost human except for the ridge of bone across his forehead when her weather senses screamed warning. "The soldiers are moving to encircle the transport. And those two with the weapons, they radiate power like a coming storm. We are out of time." They raced back upward, Charles's telepathy coordinating their escape with military precision. The Wookiee, his name was Grelnik, carried 3 prisoners who couldn't walk. Jean's telekinesis supported 2 more. Storm created a localized air current that practically carried the elderly Force-sensitive. They burst from the facility to find Magneto hovering 10 feet off the ground, surrounded by a storm of metal debris that he'd torn from the surrounding scrap mountains. Below him, a cordon of clone troopers had their weapons raised but hadn't fired. And standing between Magneto and the Republic forces were the 2 robed figures. Obi-Wan Kenobi's lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss that somehow sounded polite. The blue blade hummed with contained energy. "I am Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. In the name of the Galactic Republic, I'm ordering you to stand down and identify yourselves." Anakin's lightsaber blazed to life beside his master's, but his stance was more aggressive, ready for violence. "That metal manipulation, it's not the Force. What are you?" Magneto smiled, and it wasn't a friendly expression. "I am Magneto. And you, Jedi, are about to learn that your Force is not the only power in this galaxy." The metal storm around Eric intensified, not attacking, but making a very clear promise of what he could do if provoked. Charles felt the Jedi's alarm through their mental signatures. They'd never encountered anything like this before. "Stand down, all of you." Charles projected his thought to every mind present, clone troopers, Jedi, prisoners, and X-Men alike. The sheer psychic weight of an Omega-level telepath speaking directly into their consciousness made everyone freeze. "We're not your enemies. We're rescuing prisoners from an illegal Separatist facility. Surely your Republic doesn't execute people for that?" Obi-Wan lowered his lightsaber slightly, shocked by the telepathic contact. "That voice, it was inside my mind. Are you a Jedi? I sense no Force connection, yet you possess abilities that should be impossible. Many things you believe impossible are about to become very possible," Charles replied, this time speaking aloud. "We mean you no harm, Master Kenobi. But we will not allow these prisoners to remain captive. They've suffered enough. The standoff hung by a thread, Magneto ready to turn every clone trooper's weapon against them, Storm generating a localized lightning storm above the gathering, Cyclops' hand hovering near his visor, Wolverine's claws extended and gleaming in the toxic light. And then something unexpected happened. The Twi'lek child in Jean's arms reached out with the Force, untrained, instinctive, and touched Anakin Skywalker's mind. He gasped, sensing her terror, her pain, the experiments she'd endured. His blue eyes widened with understanding. "Master," Anakin said quietly. "These people, whatever they are, they're telling the truth. I can feel the child's memories. The Separatists were torturing Force-sensitive beings here. Trying to weaponize them." Obi-Wan's expression hardened. "Then this facility must be destroyed, and these prisoners brought to Coruscant for proper care. As for you," he looked at the X-Men with a mixture of fascination and concern. "The Jedi Council will want to speak with you. Powers like yours existing outside the Force, it raises many questions." "We don't answer to your council," Magneto said flatly. "Perhaps not," Obi-Wan agreed. "But you're in Republic space now, operating a Separatist transport and interfering with an active war zone. You can come with us willingly and explain yourselves, or," he let the implication hang. Charles Xavier met the Jedi Master's eyes and saw a good man caught in an impossible situation. "We'll come to your Coruscant. We have questions of our own that need answering. But the prisoners come with us, and they're treated with dignity." "Agreed?" Obi-Wan nodded slowly. "Agreed. Though I suspect the Council is going to have a very difficult time understanding what you are." As the X-Men boarded their transport under the watchful eyes of the clone troopers, Charles Xavier couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. His telepathy had brushed against thousands of minds since awakening in this galaxy. And somewhere, buried deep in the complexity of this Republic's government, he'd sensed something dark. Something hidden. Something that radiated malevolence and patient, terrible planning. The Clone Wars were about to meet mutant kind. And neither would ever be the same. Coruscant rose before them like a fever dream made manifest, an entire planet wrapped in cityscape, millions of lights blazing against the void, traffic lanes filled with speeders creating rivers of movement through canyons of durasteel and transparasteel. Jean Grey pressed her hand against the viewport, her telekinesis instinctively reaching out to touch the incomprehensible density of minds below. Trillions of beings. Thousands of species. All packed onto one world that had forgotten what natural ground looked like millennia ago. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "And terrifying." Storm stood beside her, and the weather goddess was trembling. "There is no sky here. No clouds, no wind, no rain. Just stone and metal stretching forever. How do these people breathe?" "Atmospheric processors," Beast explained, his nose buried in a datapad they'd acquired from Toll Score. "Thousands of them, generating oxygen and scrubbing pollutants. Fascinating engineering, though the ecological implications are nightmarish. An entire planet's biosphere replaced by technology. The hubris alone is staggering." Wolverine was less impressed. "Place smells wrong. Too clean up top, too dirty down below. And I count at least 50 different species just in the traffic around us. We stick out like a sore thumb here, Chuck." Charles Xavier sat silently in his wheelchair, his telepathic senses drinking in the overwhelming psychic landscape of the Republic's capital. So many minds. So many dreams and fears and schemes. And threading through it all, that same dark presence he'd sensed before, closer now, much closer. Somewhere in the labyrinth below, something ancient and malevolent watched the Republic's heart with patient hunger. "Professor?" Cyclops stood at attention beside him, tactical awareness on high alert. "You're sensing something." "Many things, Scott. None of them reassuring." Charles's mental voice carried undertones of deep concern. "This Republic, it's dying. The corruption runs deeper than these people know. And that darkness I mentioned, it's here on Coruscant. Close to the center of power. Their transport had been escorted by a full squadron of Republic starfighters, with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker's ship, a sleek Eta-2 Actis interceptor, leading the way. They descended through multiple traffic levels, passing from the gleaming spires of the upper city down toward a massive ziggurat that dominated the government district. The Jedi Temple, Tol Skor said quietly, his blue face pale with anxiety. I was tested there as a child. Found lacking. They sent me back to Pantora with apologies and suggestions for alternative careers. His laugh was bitter. Now I return as what? A rescued prisoner? A curiosity? Rogue placed a gloved hand on his shoulder, careful not to make skin contact. Suga, you survived torture and imprisonment. That makes you stronger than half the folks who'll be judging you. Hold your head up. Magneto stood apart from the others, his expression unreadable as he studied the temple. Eric Lencher had spent his life analyzing power structures, and he recognized one when he saw it. Look at the position. Highest point in the government district, overlooking the Senate building itself. These Jedi claim to be peacekeepers, but they've built themselves a fortress that dominates the capital. They're also the ones who rescued those prisoners, Jean pointed out. Master Kenobi could have simply destroyed the facility. He chose to investigate instead. One decent act doesn't excuse an entire system of control, Eric countered. Charles, these Jedi maintain a monopoly on force sensitivity. They take children from their families, indoctrinate them in their philosophy, and position themselves as the Republic's military leaders. Does that sound familiar? It did. Too familiar. Charles had spent his life fighting against those who would control mutants, whether through cure, through Sentinel programs, or through registration acts. But he'd also learned that not every organization with power was inherently corrupt. We reserve judgment until we have more information, Eric. These people may be flawed, but they're not our enemies. Yet. The transport settled onto one of the temple's private landing platforms. Through the viewports, the X-Men saw dozens of robed figures gathering, Jedi of every imaginable species, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. At the center stood a small figure leaning on a gnarled walking stick, his ancient face creased with wisdom and something that might have been amusement. Master Yoda, Tol Skor breathed reverently. The Grand Master himself came to meet you. I've never seen him leave the council chambers for anything less than a galactic crisis. Perhaps he considers us one, Beast observed dryly. They disembarked into an atmosphere thick with tension and force energy that made Storm's hair stand on end with static electricity. The assembled Jedi parted as Yoda approached, his walking stick clicking on the platform's durasteel surface. Despite his diminutive size, barely reaching Wolverine's waist, the ancient Jedi Master radiated authority that had nothing to do with physical stature. Yoda's large eyes studied each X-Man in turn, and Charles felt the lightest possible telepathic probe, not intrusive, merely curious. The professor didn't resist, instead projecting a sense of peaceful introduction. Yoda's ears twitched with what might have been surprise. Speak with the mind, you do, Yoda said, his backward syntax somehow fitting his timeless presence. Yet touch the Force, you do not. Curious, this is. Very curious indeed. He turned to Obi-Wan. Explain you will, Master Kenobi, how you found these unusual beings. Obi-Wan bowed respectfully. Master, we responded to a distress beacon from a Separatist research facility on Raxus Prime. We found these individuals had already liberated approximately 30 prisoners, Force sensitives who were being subjected to illegal experiments. They demonstrated abilities that appear to function independently of the Force. Telekinesis without Force connection. Weather manipulation through unknown means. Mental control that surpasses anything we've documented. And telepathy that works on Force sensitives and non-sensitives alike. Anakin stepped forward, his youthful enthusiasm barely contained. Master Yoda, the child they rescued, I touched her memories through the Force. The experiments were brutal. Separatist scientists trying to artificially enhance midichlorian production, attempting to create controllable Force users. These strangers stopped it. Yoda's walking stick tapped thoughtfully. Noble, their actions were. But questions remain. From where do you come? And how possess such powers without the Force do you? Charles Xavier guided his wheelchair forward, Jean's telekinesis ensuring smooth movement across the platform. I am Professor Charles Xavier. My companions and I are travelers from very far away. We don't fully understand how we arrived in your galaxy, but we mean no harm to your Republic or your Jedi Order. From beyond the galaxy, you claim. A tall Jedi with a conical head and deep-set eyes stepped forward. Master Ki-Adi-Mundi, Charles gleaned from surface thoughts. Impossible. Hyperspace routes don't extend beyond the galactic rim. And your ship bears Separatist markings. Because we stole it after waking up imprisoned on their station, Cyclops said bluntly. We didn't exactly have time to shop for transportation. Magneto's cape billowed as he moved to stand beside Charles. Let's dispense with the pleasantries, shall we? You Jedi have a monopoly on supernatural abilities in this galaxy. Now you've encountered beings whose powers function through different mechanisms. That makes us either a threat to be eliminated or an asset to be controlled. Which will it be? The assembled Jedi shifted uncomfortably. Several hands moved toward lightsaber hilts. But Yoda merely chuckled, a dry sound like autumn leaves rustling. Direct, he is. Appreciate this, I do. The Grand Master gestured toward the temple entrance. Inside, we will speak. The Council, questions has. And answers, perhaps you seek as well. Common ground, we may find. Or not. But talk first, we will. Fight later, if necessary. It was the most honest diplomatic statement Charles had ever heard. He nodded slowly. Agreed. But our people stay together, and the prisoners we rescued are treated as guests, not suspects. Agreed, Yoda said simply. They were led into the Jedi Temple, and the architecture alone spoke volumes about this order's history. Everything was designed on a massive scale, vaulted ceilings soaring hundreds of feet overhead, columns carved from single pieces of stone, vast meditation chambers where sunlight filtered through ancient stained glass. This was an organization that had endured for millennia, that saw itself as eternal and unchanging. Storm found it suffocating. Beast found it magnificent. Magneto found it concerning. The Jedi Council chamber was a circular room at the temple's pinnacle, with 12 chairs arranged in a circle and massive windows offering a panoramic view of Coruscant's endless cityscape. As the X-Men entered, Charles's telepathy identified each council member, their names, their concerns, their barely concealed anxiety about the unknown variables that had just entered their orderly galaxy. Master Mace Windu occupied the chair directly opposite the entrance. His dark face stern and unreadable. Professor Xavier. Your arrival raises numerous questions that touch upon Jedi doctrine, Republic security, and the nature of the Force itself. We would appreciate honest answers. As would we, Charles replied calmly. We're as confused about our presence here as you are. The last thing we remember from our home was investigating an anomalous energy reading. We awakened imprisoned, fought our way free, and rescued others who were suffering. That's the extent of what we know. Your home, Mace Windu said carefully. You claim to be from beyond our galaxy. Beyond your galaxy. Beyond your dimension, perhaps. Beast adjusted his glasses nervously. The stellar formations visible from Raxus Prime matched no astronomical database from our world. The species here, present company included, are completely unknown to our science. The most logical conclusion is that we've been transported across dimensional or spatial barriers that shouldn't be crossable. A Togruta Jedi Master named Shak Ti leaned forward. You speak of dimensions beyond our own. The Force does touch upon such possibilities in ancient texts, but they remain theoretical. How could you survive such a transition? Jean Grey spoke up, her voice carrying both strength and vulnerability. We're mutants. Homo superior. Our species evolved from baseline humanity with genetic variations that grant extraordinary abilities. My telekinesis, the Professor's telepathy, Storm's weather control, these are expressions of our evolved genetics. Evolution, Yoda mused. Natural, you claim your powers are. Not trained, not learned, but born with them, you were. Similar to the Force, this sounds. Yet different, it clearly is. Wolverine snorted. Not that similar, pint-size. The Force is something you gotta train for, right? Be all calm and meditate and whatnot. My claws popped out when I was a kid. Storm started controlling weather when she was terrified. We got our powers whether we wanted them or not. And they have made you outcasts, Kit Fisto, a Nautolan Jedi, said with surprising empathy. I sense pain in your memories. Persecution. Your kind has been hunted. Yes. Charles's telepathic voice carried the weight of decades of struggle. Mutants have been feared, hated, and killed simply for being different. We've fought our entire lives for coexistence between mutants and baseline humans. For the right to exist without persecution. Mace Windu's expression softened slightly. Then you understand the burden the Jedi carry. We too are different from ordinary beings. We too have been feared and misunderstood throughout history. Perhaps we have more in common than I initially believed. Or perhaps you've simply been fortunate enough to monopolize power for so long that you've forgotten what persecution feels like, Magneto said coldly. Tell me, Master Windu, how many non-Force sensitives sit on your council? How many ordinary citizens have any say in Jedi policy? You speak of understanding persecution while sitting in a palace overlooking the galaxy's capital. The temperature in the chamber dropped perceptibly. Several Jedi Masters bristled at Magneto's accusation. But before anyone could respond, Charles Xavier's telepathy suddenly screamed a warning. The dark presence he'd been sensing, it was moving. Approaching. And it radiated such malevolent patience, such carefully hidden corruption, that Charles actually gasped aloud. Professor. Jean was at his side instantly. What is it? Charles's face had gone pale. Something's coming. Something dark and terrible, and his telepathy expanded outward, searching desperately for the source. It was close. So close. And it was heading directly for the council chamber. Jedi, there's something in your temple. Something that radiates malevolence beyond anything I've ever sensed. It's... The chamber doors opened. A dignified human in elaborate robes entered. Flanked by two red-armored guards. He was perhaps 60, with a grandfatherly face and kind eyes that crinkled with a warm smile. But to Charles Xavier's telepathic senses, this man was a void wrapped in shadows, not absent from the Force but rather a deliberate absence, a carefully constructed lie that fooled even Force-sensitive perception. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, Mace Windu stood with obvious respect. We weren't expecting you. The council is currently in a closed session. My apologies, Master Windu, Palpatine said in a voice like honey and poison mixed. But I heard reports of unusual visitors to our capital. As Supreme Chancellor, I felt it prudent to welcome them personally. The Republic extends its hospitality to all who oppose the Separatist threat. Those kind eyes swept across the X-Men, and when they met Charles Xavier's gaze, the professor saw something that made his blood run cold. Recognition. Calculation. And beneath it all, a darkness so profound that it made every evil mutant Charles had ever faced seem like children playing at villainy. Palpatine knew. Somehow, this man knew exactly what Charles was sensing. And he was amused. Welcome to Coruscant, the Supreme Chancellor said warmly. I do so look forward to learning more about you. After all, the Republic has many enemies. And we can always use powerful allies in these troubled times. Magneto's hands clenched into fists, metal throughout the temple beginning to vibrate in response to his agitation. Storm's eyes flickered white with barely suppressed lightning. And Wolverine's claws extended with a barely audible snick, his animal instincts screaming danger. But it was Charles Xavier who spoke, his telepathic voice carefully controlled despite the horror flooding through him. Master Yoda. Masters of the Council. I need to speak with you. Privately. Immediately. What I have to tell you about your Supreme Chancellor will change everything you think you know about this war. Yoda's ears drooped slightly. His ancient eyes studied Charles with sudden, terrible understanding. Suspected, I have. Confirmed, it now is. A great darkness, we face. Greater than any of us knew. The Clone Wars had just become infinitely more complicated. Because the X-Men had arrived in a galaxy where the greatest threat wasn't the Separatists or battle droids or even the Sith. It was the friendly, grandfatherly politician standing in the council chamber, smiling like a patient predator who had just been handed exactly what he wanted. The aftermath of Charles Xavier's revelation played out in a secure meditation chamber deep within the Jedi Temple, shielded by layers of Force energy meant to prevent eavesdropping. Palpatine had been politely but firmly escorted from the council chambers, an unprecedented breach of protocol that the Supreme Chancellor had accepted with unsettling grace. Now the X-Men faced 12 of the galaxy's most powerful Force wielders, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a lightsaber. Explain, Mace Windu said flatly. You claim our Supreme Chancellor, a man who has served the Republic faithfully for over a decade, is some kind of threat. Based on what evidence? Charles Xavier's telepathic senses were still reeling from the brief contact with Palpatine's mind. Master Windu, I am a telepath of considerable power. I can sense thoughts, emotions, and intentions across vast distances. What I sensed from Chancellor Palpatine was not simply corruption or ambition. It was a void, a deliberately constructed mental shield designed to hide something so dark that it makes every villain I've encountered seem benign by comparison. A void in the Force, Yoda said quietly. Sensed this before, I have. In the Chancellor's presence, the dark side clouds everything. Investigated, we have. But proof, we lack. And accusations without proof against the Republic's leader, he shook his head sadly. Catastrophic, the consequences would be. Obi-Wan stroked his beard thoughtfully. The Professor's abilities function outside the Force. Perhaps he can perceive something we cannot. But even so, sensing darkness doesn't prove criminal intent. Many politicians have dark thoughts. It's practically a job requirement. This is beyond dark thoughts, Jean Grey interjected, her own empathic abilities having touched the edges of what Charles sensed. What the Professor felt from Palpatine wasn't human darkness. It was something ancient. Patient. Like a predator that's been hunting for centuries and is finally closing in on its prey. Anakin shifted uncomfortably. The Chancellor has been nothing but supportive of the Jedi Order. He's expanded our authority, given us command of the clone army, trusted us to lead the Republic's defense. Why would he do that if he's our enemy? Because he's giving you rope to hang yourselves with, Magneto said bluntly. The Master of Magnetism had been studying the Jedi Council with the same analytical eye he'd applied to countless human power structures. Look at your position. You've gone from peacekeepers to generals. From mediators to warriors. Every day this war continues, you move further from your principles and closer to becoming what you claim to oppose. The war was thrust upon us, Ki-Adi-Mundi said defensively. The Separatists attacked the Republic. We had no choice but to defend it. Didn't you? Eric's eyes narrowed. Charles, how many minds did you sense when we arrived on this world? Trillions. And how many Jedi are there? Approximately 10,000, Shak Ti answered. Though our numbers have been declining. The war has been costly. Magneto spread his hands. 10,000 force wielders trying to command an army of millions while fighting a war across an entire galaxy. You're spread impossibly thin. Exhausted. Making compromises you never would have considered before. And who benefits from the Jedi Order being slowly ground down by an unwinnable conflict? The silence that followed was damning. Wolverine had been pacing like a caged animal throughout the discussion, his enhanced senses cataloging every exit and potential threat. Look, I ain't a politician and I sure as hell ain't a detective. But I've been in enough wars to know when someone's playing both sides. And that guy who walked in here. He smelled wrong. Real wrong. Fierce sweat hidden under expensive cologne. And something else. Something like, he struggled for words. Like old blood and burnt ozone. The scent of the dark side, Yoda said heavily. Recognize it, I do. Encountered it, I have, in my 900 years. But proof of Sith allegiance, smell alone is not. Sith. Beast's analytical mind immediately began processing this new information. I've been reading the historical databases Tolscore provided. The Sith were your ancient enemies, correct? Force wielders who embraced passion and power rather than serenity and service. But according to these records, they were wiped out nearly 1,000 years ago. Extinct we believed them, Yoda acknowledged. Mistaken, we may have been. 10 years ago, a Sith Lord appeared. Darth Maul, he was called. Killed my former apprentice, Count Dooku's master, he did. But there are always, a master and an apprentice. Maul was slain, but his master escaped. Hidden, he remains. Charles felt puzzle pieces clicking into place. And you never considered that the Sith Master might be hiding in plain sight? In a position of ultimate power where no one would think to look. We considered it, Mace Windu said grimly. But how do you investigate the Supreme Chancellor without evidence? How do you accuse the most popular politician in the Republic of being a Sith Lord without proof? The political fallout alone would tear the galaxy apart. So you do nothing, Magneto said with barely concealed disgust. You sense evil, you suspect corruption, but you maintain the status quo because confronting it would be inconvenient. Charles, why did we agree to help these people again? Because they're trying to do the right thing in an impossible situation, Charles replied calmly, though his own frustration was evident. And because we understand what it's like to be manipulated by those we should be able to trust. Eric, the question isn't whether the Jedi have made mistakes. The question is what we do about Palpatine now that we know he's a threat. Storm had been listening quietly, but now she spoke with the authority of one who had been worshipped as a goddess. In my homeland, when we suspected a leader of corruption, we tested them. We created situations that would reveal their true nature. Perhaps your chancellor needs to be tested. How? Anakin asked. He's surrounded by guards, protected by layers of security, and politically untouchable. Even if we could prove he's a Sith, half the Senate would probably support him anyway. He's won them over completely. Cyclops, who had been silent while his tactical mind worked through scenarios, finally spoke. Then we don't confront him directly. We investigate the war itself. If Palpatine is playing both sides, there must be evidence. Communication between Republic and Separatist forces. Financial transfers. Orders that don't make sense unless someone wants the war to continue. The clone army, Jean said suddenly. Charles, you sense their minds. They're all identical. All programmed with absolute loyalty. What if that programming includes something else? Something hidden. Beast pulled out his datapad, furry fingers flying across the interface. According to the historical records, the clone army was commissioned by a Jedi master named Cyphodaius approximately 10 years ago. But Master Cyphodaius died before the clones were completed. The army was discovered by Master Kenobi by accident, just when the Republic desperately needed military forces to fight the Separatists. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Obi-Wan's face had gone pale. Are you suggesting the clone army was created as part of a Sith plot? That we've been commanding an army designed to betray us? I'm suggesting that everything about this war is too convenient, Beast replied. A separatist movement that provides the perfect enemy. A clone army that appears exactly when needed. A chancellor who gains emergency powers with each crisis. And a Jedi Order too exhausted and distracted to see the trap closing around them. Yoda's walking stick tapped against the floor with unusual force. Blind, we have been. Arrogant, we became. Thought the Sith extinct, we did. Believed ourselves the sole guardians of balance. But balance, true balance, requires seeing clearly. And clouded, our vision has become. Rogue had been uncharacteristically quiet, but now she spoke up, her southern accent soft with sympathy. Y'all are beating yourselves up pretty good here. But seems to me you're doing what you think is right, same as we always tried to do back home. Sometimes the bad guys are just real good at hiding. Doesn't make you stupid for not seeing them right away. The question remains, Mace Windu said, bringing the discussion back to practical matters. What do we do now? We can't arrest Palpatine without evidence. We can't investigate him openly without alerting him that we suspect. And we certainly can't allow him to continue consolidating power if he truly is a Sith Lord. You need allies outside your order, Magneto said. People who aren't bound by your rules or protocols. People whose powers function independently of the Force and therefore might be harder for a Sith to detect or manipulate. His smile was predatory. You need us. Several council members bristled at the suggestion, but Yoda merely nodded slowly. Right, he is. Need you, we do. But trust you completely, we cannot. Unknown, you remain. And dangerous, your powers are. Mutual trust will have to be earned, Charles agreed. But right now, we share a common enemy. Palpatine fears what we represent, powers he can't control, minds he can't read, abilities that exist outside his understanding of the Force. That makes us valuable. And potentially, that makes us targets. As if summoned by the mention of targeting, an alarm suddenly blared throughout the temple. Clone troopers' boots echoed in the corridors outside. And through the Force, every Jedi in the chamber felt a disturbance, something violent happening in the lower levels. Anakin was on his feet instantly, lightsaber in hand. The prisoner bay. Someone's attacking the freed prisoners. The X-Men moved as one, decades of combat experience overriding their unfamiliarity with the temple's layout. They burst from the meditation chamber and raced downward, following Anakin and Obi-Wan through corridors that twisted and descended into the temple's depths. They found carnage. The chamber where Tol Skor and the other rescued prisoners had been housed was a smoking ruin. Bodies lay scattered, not all dead, but many wounded. And standing in the center of the destruction was a figure that made even Wolverine pause. She was humanoid and female, with pale skin and a bald head. Her eyes burned with yellow Sith fire, and she wielded twin lightsabers with a grace that spoke of decades of training. But what made her truly terrifying was the sheer malevolence radiating from her presence, pure dark side energy focused into a weapon of perfect lethality. Asajj Ventress, Obi-Wan breathed. Count Dooku's assassin. What is she doing here? Ventress's lips curved into a cruel smile. The prisoners knew too much about Separatist operations. My master sent me to ensure their silence. I didn't expect to find such interesting new specimens as well. Her yellow eyes fixed on the X-Men with predatory interest. You're the ones who interfered on Raxus Prime. The ones who wield power without the Force. Count Dooku is very interested in meeting you. Not interested, Wolverine growled, claws extending as he dropped into a combat crouch. But I'm interested in showing you what these claws can do to your fancy laser swords. Ventress moved like lightning. Her red lightsabers became a blur of deadly energy as she engaged Obi-Wan and Anakin simultaneously, pushing both Jedi back with casual contempt. Dark side energy crackled around her, enhancing her speed and strength beyond normal limits. But she hadn't counted on mutants. Cyclops' optic blast caught her in the side, the concussive force sending her crashing through a stone column. Storm's lightning arced from the ceiling, forcing Ventress to dodge rather than press her attack. And Magneto simply ripped her lightsabers from her hands with a gesture, the weapons flying across the chamber as Eric demonstrated his control over any metal, even the exotic alloys in Jedi technology. Impossible, Ventress snarled, her hands suddenly empty. She tried to summon her weapons back through the Force, but Magneto's magnetic grip was absolute. You can't, no one can. We're not from your galaxy, darlin', Rogue said, moving to help a wounded Pantoran prisoner. And your Force tricks don't mean much to us. Jean's telekinesis wrapped around Ventress like invisible chains, lifting the Sith assassin off her feet. Professor, I've got her. But her mind, it's different from the others. Trained to resist Force-based mental attacks but completely unprepared for telepathy. Charles Xavier's wheelchair moved forward, his powerful mind reaching out to touch Ventress's consciousness. Tell me who sent you. Was it Dooku? Or someone else? Someone higher in the Separatist hierarchy? Ventress struggled against both the telekinetic restraints and the telepathic probe. Get out of my mind. The dark side will protect me from. Her words cut off as Charles's telepathy bypassed every defense she'd spent years building. Defenses designed to protect against Force users were useless against Omega-level mutant telepathy. I see, Charles said quietly. Count Dooku sent you, yes. But he received his orders from someone else. Someone who wanted these prisoners eliminated not because they knew Separatist secrets, but because they might reveal something else. Something about the clone army's true purpose. What? Mace Windu demanded. What did she learn? Charles's expression was grim. The prisoners were Force-sensitive, yes. But the Separatists weren't just experimenting on them. They were comparing them to another group of Force-sensitive specimens, clone troopers. Apparently, a small percentage of the clone army exhibits midichlorian counts higher than baseline. The Separatists were trying to understand why. And what they discovered, he paused, the implications horrifying even him. The clones have been programmed with hidden protocols. Contingency orders that can be activated with specific code phrases. One of those protocols targets Jedi. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Every Jedi present understood the implication instantly. An army designed to kill us, Anakin whispered. We've been commanding our own executioners. Yoda's ears drooped low. Worse than we feared, this is. Not just corruption, but conspiracy. Centuries in the making, perhaps. And at its center. Palpatine, Obi-Wan finished. Everything leads back to the Chancellor. The clone army commissioned by a dead Jedi. The Separatist movement led by a former Jedi. The war that forces us to spread ourselves thin while commanding troops programmed to eventually betray us. It's all connected. Ventress laughed despite her captivity, the sound bitter and mocking. You're beginning to understand. But it's too late. My master's master has planned for every contingency. Even if you know the truth, what will you do? Arrest the Supreme Chancellor? Disband the clone army during a galactic war? You're trapped in a web you can't escape, and every move you make draws it tighter. Magneto stepped forward, his eyes cold. Charles, let me into her mind. I want to know everything she knows about this conspiracy. I'll extract it whether she cooperates or not. No, Charles said firmly. We're not torturers, Eric. No matter how justified it might seem. Then what? Magneto demanded. We let her go. Hope she develops a conscience. Charles, these people are fighting a war they've already lost. The only question is whether they'll take the entire galaxy down with them when they fall. Before Charles could respond, Ventress's body suddenly convulsed. Dark side energy erupted from her in an explosion of pure malevolence that shattered Jean's telekinetic grip and sent everyone flying backward. When the smoke cleared, Ventress was standing free, her hands crackling with force lightning. "Count Dooku taught me many things," she hissed. "Including how to overload my own midi-chlorians if necessary. You want information? Then you'll have to catch me first." She thrust her hands toward the ceiling, and dark side lightning tore through stone and metal, creating a massive collapse that filled the chamber with debris and dust. By the time the X-Men and Jedi recovered, Ventress had vanished through the chaos, her force presence disappearing as she fled into Coruscant's endless cityscape. "She'll warn them," Anakin said urgently. "Dooku and whoever's giving him orders will know we're investigating." "Good," Wolverine said grimly, retracting his claws. "Let them know. Maybe they'll make a mistake." Charles Xavier wasn't so optimistic. He'd sensed something in Ventress's mind before she escaped, a fragment of memory from her master. A conversation between Dooku and a hooded figure whose face remained hidden, but whose presence radiated that same terrible darkness Charles had felt from Palpatine. The conspiracy was real. The trap was real. And the X-Men had just become pieces on a chessboard where every move might be exactly what their unknown enemy wanted. Yoda's ancient voice broke the heavy silence. "Changed, the game has. Know the truth, we do. But prove it, we cannot. And act rashly, we must not. Help us, will you? Navigate this darkness, together we might. Alone, doomed we certainly are." Charles looked at his X-Men, at Jean and Scott standing together, at Storm trying to comfort the wounded prisoners, at Rogue helping Beast catalog the damage, at Wolverine and Magneto both tense and ready for more violence. They'd been thrown into a war not their own, fighting enemies they barely understood, for a galaxy that didn't even know mutants existed. But if there was one thing the X-Men understood, it was fighting impossible battles against overwhelming odds. "We'll help," Charles said quietly. "But we do this our way. No more secrets, no more half measures. If Palpatine is orchestrating this war, we expose him. If the clone army is compromised, we find a way to free them. And if this galaxy needs to learn that the Force isn't the only power in the universe," he smiled slightly. "Then it's time for a demonstration of what mutants can do." The Clone Wars had just evolved. The Sith had spent a millennium planning their revenge. But now they faced something they'd never encountered in all their scheming, mutants who played by different rules, wielded different powers, and didn't give a damn about prophecies or ancient conflicts. Palpatine had gotten what he thought he wanted when the X-Men arrived. He was about to learn that sometimes, the greatest danger comes from the variables you never saw coming. The war room deep within the Jedi Temple had become the X-Men's temporary headquarters, and the contrast between the two groups couldn't have been more stark. On one side, Jedi Masters in earth-toned robes meditated over holographic star maps, their connection to the Force guiding strategic decisions. On the other, mutants in tactical gear analyzed the same data through purely rational means, telepathy, tactical training, and centuries of combined combat experience that had nothing to do with mystical energy fields. "The Separatist fleet is massing here, at the Sluis Van shipyards," Anakin said, pointing to a cluster of red markers on the hologram. "If they take that system, they'll control a major supply route into the core worlds. The Republic Navy wants to send 3 battle groups to reinforce the garrison." "It's a trap," Cyclops said flatly, his tactical mind immediately recognizing the pattern. "Look at the force distribution. The Separatists are showing just enough strength to make the shipyard seem like a valuable target, but not so much that you'd think twice about attacking. They want you to commit those battle groups." Obi-Wan studied the map more carefully. "What makes you so certain?" "Because I've run this exact play before," Scott replied. "When you want to draw enemy forces out of position, you threaten something valuable but not critical. The shipyards are important, but losing them wouldn't cripple the Republic. However, pulling 3 battle groups to defend them would leave," he traced his finger across the hologram. "Coruscant itself with minimal fleet coverage. And that's when the real attack comes. Mace Windu's expression darkened. A strike at the capital. But our intelligence suggests the Separatist fleet isn't strong enough for a direct assault on Coruscant's defenses. Your intelligence is being fed to you by a Sith Lord who controls both sides of this war, Magneto said dryly. Perhaps trust it less, The tension in the room was palpable. 3 days had passed since Ventress's attack, and the fragile alliance between the X-Men and the Jedi Council was strained by fundamentally different approaches to problem-solving. The Jedi sought balance, patience, and harmony with the Force. The X-Men sought decisive action, regardless of the philosophical implications. Beast was hunched over a datapad, having spent the past 72 hours analyzing every scrap of data about the clone army's creation. I found something disturbing in the Kaminoan cloning records, the ones Master Kenobi recovered years ago. The clones' behavioral modification chips, officially designated as inhibitor chips, were supposedly installed to prevent aggressive behavior. But the neural mapping suggests something far more sophisticated. These chips can override voluntary motor control, suppress free will, and compel specific actions when triggered by external stimuli. Code phrases, Jean added. She'd been working alongside Hank, her telekinesis allowing her to interface with computer systems in ways that impressed even the Jedi archivists. We found references to contingency orders buried in encrypted military protocols. Order 65, arrest the Supreme Chancellor if he's deemed unfit. Order 37, mass arrest of civilian leadership. And Order 66, she paused, her face pale. Execute all Jedi for treason against the Republic. The silence that followed was absolute. Execute the Jedi, Anakin repeated, his voice hollow. The clones we've fought beside, trusted with our lives, they have orders to kill us. Not just orders, Beast clarified grimly. Compulsions. Once activated, the chips would override the clones' personalities entirely. They wouldn't be choosing to betray you. They'd be puppets with no choice in the matter. Shakti, who had spent years working with the clone army on Kamino, looked physically ill. All this time, we thought we were building an army to defend the Republic. Instead, we've been building our own executioners, just as the Separatist prisoners suggested. And who has the authority to activate these orders? Obi-Wan asked, though Charles could sense he already knew the answer. The Supreme Chancellor, Storm said quietly. The weather goddess had been standing by the windows, staring out at Coruscant's endless cityscape with barely concealed distress. The very man you suspect of orchestrating this entire war. One command from him, and every clone in the galaxy becomes a weapon pointed at your hearts. Yoda's ears were flat against his head, his ancient face creased with sorrow. Foreseen this, I did not. Blinded by our arrogance, we were. Believed ourselves untouchable, we did. And now, on the precipice of annihilation, we stand. You're not dead yet, Wolverine growled from where he'd been sharpening his claws, a nervous habit that several Jedi found deeply unsettling. We got warning before the trap closed. That gives us options. What options? Ki-Adi-Mundi demanded. We can't remove the inhibitor chips from millions of clone troopers without alerting Palpatine. We can't arrest him without evidence that would convince the Senate. And we can't simply abandon the war, the Separatists are still killing billions of innocents. Can't, Magneto said with barely concealed contempt. Your entire philosophy seems built around accepting limitations. Where I come from, we learned that when the system is rigged against you, you don't play by its rules. You overturn the board. And create chaos in the process, Mace Windu countered. You're suggesting a coup. The violent overthrow of the Republic's legitimate government based on suspicions and circumstantial evidence. That path leads to tyranny, not justice. Eric Lencher rose from his seat, cape billowing despite the still air. Your Republic is already tyranny. It's just wearing a pleasant mask. How many systems have seceded because they felt unrepresented? How many species are enslaved while your Senate debates endlessly? How many suffer while you Jedi meditate on balance? At least I'm honest about my methods. Charles Xavier's telepathic voice cut through the rising argument like a blade. Enough. Eric, antagonizing our allies serves no purpose. Masters, Eric's methods may be extreme, but his frustration is understandable. We need actionable intelligence, not philosophical debates about the nature of justice. The professor's right, Cyclops said, always the pragmatist. Let's focus on what we can do. First priority, can we remove those inhibitor chips without triggering them? Beast nodded slowly. Theoretically, yes. The chips are sophisticated but still technological. They can be surgically removed or disabled. However, we'd need the cooperation of the clones themselves, and we can't simply announce what we're doing without alerting every Separatist spy in the Republic, including Palpatine himself. Then we start small, Jean suggested. We approach individual clones we trust. Explain the situation. Give them a choice. Anakin shook his head. The clones don't think like that. They're programmed for absolute loyalty to the Republic and its chain of command. Telling them their Supreme Chancellor is a Sith Lord would go against everything they believe. They'd report us for treason. Not if we could prove it, Rogue interjected. She'd been quietly absorbing the conversation, her gloved hands clasped tightly. Y'all keep saying, you need evidence. Well, what if we make Palpatine reveal himself? Force his hand somehow. How? Shakti asked. He's been hiding his true nature for years, possibly decades. What could possibly make him drop his mask now? A slow smile spread across Magneto's face. He's hidden because he had no opposition. Because the Jedi were too weak and blind to threaten him. But now there are variables in play he can't control. Mutants whose powers function outside the Force. Telepaths who can sense his darkness. Weather manipulators who could devastate his carefully constructed plans. Eric's eyes gleamed with predatory intelligence. What if we simply refuse to play his game? What if we start dismantling his conspiracy piece by piece, forcing him to act openly to stop us? You want to bait a Sith Lord into revealing himself, Obi-Wan said incredulously. That's possibly the most reckless plan I've ever heard. It's also brilliant, Anakin admitted reluctantly. If we can force Palpatine to use Sith powers in public, his political protection evaporates. The Senate would have no choice but to act. Charles was already thinking through the implications. It's dangerous. Palpatine has been patient for years, he won't abandon caution easily. We'd need to threaten something he values more than his cover. Something critical to his long-term plans. The clone army, Beast said suddenly. If Order 66 is the linchpin of his strategy for eliminating the Jedi, what happens if we start removing inhibitor chips? Not all of them, that's impossible. But enough to demonstrate we've discovered his trap. Enough to threaten his carefully timed genocide. Storm moved from the window, her white eyes crackling with barely contained lightning. And if he moves against us for it, he reveals himself. The X-Men have faced this strategy before, we call it forcing the enemy's hand by becoming a threat they cannot ignore. It's too risky, Mace Windu said firmly. If Palpatine realizes we know about Order 66, he might activate it immediately rather than risk losing his weapon. Then we move fast, Cyclops countered. Military precision. We identify key clone commanders, ones in positions to protect Jedi if Order 66 is activated. We extract them under various pretexts, remove their chips, explain the truth. Build a network of clones who know what's coming and can warn their Jedi generals when the order is given. And what about the Separatist attack you predicted? Obi-Wan asked. If Coruscant is about to be assaulted, we need to prepare defenses, not conduct secret surgeries on clone commanders. We do both, Charles said quietly. His telepathy had been monitoring Coruscant's political sphere throughout their discussion, and what he sensed troubled him deeply. Master Kenobi, the attack is already in motion. I'm sensing panic in the Senate district. Something's happened. Something Palpatine orchestrated to justify his next power grab. As if summoned by Charles's words, an alarm began blaring throughout the temple. Clone troopers rushed through corridors with urgent purpose. And through the Force, every Jedi felt a disturbance, something terrible occurring in orbit above Coruscant. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the war room, showing a Republic officer with terror in his eyes. Masters. The Separatist fleet has emerged from hyperspace directly above Coruscant. General Grievous himself is leading the assault. They've already breached the outer defense platforms and, the transmission cut off in a burst of static. Impossible, Mace Windu breathed. Our intelligence indicated the Separatist fleet was scattered across a dozen systems. How could they mass such force without our scouts detecting it? Because someone gave them the defense codes, Magneto said flatly. Someone who wanted Coruscant attacked at precisely this moment. Someone who needs to be seen as the Republic's savior one more time. He turned to Charles. Your Sith Lord is making his move. Through the temple's windows, they could see it now, points of light in the sky that were starships engaged in brutal combat. Explosions blossomed like deadly flowers as Separatist forces clashed with Coruscant's defense fleet. We extract them under various pretexts, remove their chips, explain the truth. Build a network of clones who know what's coming and can warn their Jedi generals when the order is given. And what about the Separatist attack you predicted? Obi-Wan asked. If Coruscant is about to be assaulted, we need to prepare defenses, not conduct secret surgeries on clone commanders. We do both, Charles said quietly. His telepathy had been monitoring Coruscant's political sphere throughout their discussion, and what he sensed troubled him deeply. Master Kenobi, the attack is already in motion. I'm sensing panic in the Senate district. Something's happened. Something Palpatine orchestrated to justify his next power grab. As if summoned by Charles's words, an alarm began blaring throughout the temple. Clone troopers rushed through corridors with urgent purpose. And through the Force, every Jedi felt a disturbance, something terrible occurring in orbit above Coruscant. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the war room, showing a Republic officer with terror in his eyes. Masters. The Separatist fleet has emerged from hyperspace directly above Coruscant. General Grievous himself is leading the assault. They've already breached the outer defense platforms and, the transmission cut off in a burst of static. Impossible, Mace Windu breathed. Our intelligence indicated the Separatist fleet was scattered across a dozen systems. How could they mass such force without our scouts detecting it? Because someone gave them the defense codes, Magneto said flatly. Someone who wanted Coruscant attacked at precisely this moment. Someone who needs to be seen as the Republic's savior one more time. He turned to Charles. Your Sith Lord is making his move. Through the temple's windows, they could see it now, points of light in the sky that were starships engaged in brutal combat. Explosions blossomed like deadly flowers as Separatist forces clashed with Coruscant's defense fleet. And descending through the chaos came smaller ships, landing craft and assault transports headed for the planet's surface. They're targeting the Senate building, Anakin said urgently, studying the tactical displays. If Grievous captures the Senate, he could execute every senator. The Republic's government would collapse overnight. Or Palpatine stages a miraculous rescue, solidifying his power even further, Charles countered. Either outcome serves his purposes. Chaos breeds opportunity for those willing to exploit it. Yoda's walking stick tapped the floor with sudden decision. Act we must. Into battle, the Jedi will go. Defend the Senate, we shall. But you, X-Men, another task, you have. The clones. Begin removing the chips, you must. Start with those closest to this temple. Build your network of freed soldiers. And if Palpatine moves against you, the ancient Jedi's eyes gleamed with steel that belied his diminutive size. Defend yourselves, you will. And care not what he reveals in the process. It was permission. Not explicit, but clear enough. The Jedi Council was sanctioning action that might provoke the Sith Lord into revealing himself. They were gambling the entire galaxy on the hope that the X-Men could do what the Jedi could not, force evil into the light. "We'll need medical facilities," Beast said immediately, his mind already cataloging requirements. "Surgical equipment, anesthesia, and absolute privacy. I can perform the procedures, but I'll need several hours per patient." "The lower temple levels," Shock T suggested. "Old meditation chambers that were converted to medical bays during the Old Republic Wars. They're shielded, secure, and rarely visited. I'll guide you there personally." Jean placed a hand on Charles's shoulder. "Professor, if we do this, there's no going back. We're committing to this galaxy's war. To these people's fight." Charles looked at each of his X-Men in turn. Jean and Scott, who'd followed him through countless battles. Storm, who'd faced gods and emerged stronger. Beast, whose brilliant mind had solved impossible problems. Rogue, who carried the weight of every life she'd ever touched. Wolverine, who'd survived centuries of horror and still chose to fight for others. And Eric, his oldest friend and occasional enemy, who understood the price of standing against tyranny better than anyone. "We've always been involved," Charles said quietly. "From the moment we arrived in this galaxy, we became part of its story. The question was never if we'd fight, it was what we'd fight for. And if we can prevent a genocide, save billions from a war orchestrated by evil," he smiled slightly. "Then we do what X-Men have always done. We stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. No matter the cost." Explosions rocked the temple as Separatist fighters strafed the upper levels. Klaxons wailed. Jedi rushed to defensive positions. And somewhere above them, General Grievous commanded an army of battle droids intent on capturing or destroying the Republic's heart. The Battle of Coruscant had begun. But beneath the chaos of war, a different battle was starting, one fought in secret, with surgical precision, against an enemy who had spent 1,000 years preparing for victory. The X-Men were about to teach the Sith Lords a lesson they should have learned long ago: evolution doesn't stop. New powers emerge. New variables enter play. And the best-laid plans of ancient evils can be undone by those who refuse to accept that fate is predetermined. Magneto raised his hands, and throughout the temple, metal responded to his will, blast doors reinforcing, weapon systems activating, the very structure of the building becoming an extension of his power. "Well then," he said with grim satisfaction. "Let's show this galaxy what mutants can do." The Clone Wars had just become a three-way conflict. Republic versus Separatists versus a hidden Sith conspiracy. And the X-Men were about to upset the balance in ways that even Yoda's 900 years of wisdom couldn't predict. The Battle of Coruscant raged above while beneath the Jedi Temple, Beast's surgical theater operated in a bubble of eerie calm. The converted meditation chamber was now a makeshift operating room, its ancient stone walls covered in salvaged medical equipment that Hank McCoy had jury-rigged into something functional. On the operating table lay Commander Cody, second-in-command of the 212th Attack Battalion and one of the Republic's most decorated clone officers. "This is treason," Cody said quietly, though he made no move to resist as Beast's medical scanners mapped his neural architecture. "Unauthorized medical procedures on military personnel. Conspiracy against the chain of command. I should be reporting this to the Supreme Chancellor." Jean Grey's voice was gentle but firm as her telekinesis held the commander in place, not restraining him, but ensuring he couldn't act on trained impulses. "Commander, what we're about to show you will fundamentally change your understanding of your purpose. Please. Trust us for just a few more minutes." Obi-Wan Kenobi stood in the corner, his presence the only reason Cody had agreed to this at all. The Jedi Master's face was tight with concern as he watched his most trusted officer undergo a procedure he barely understood. "Cody, I wouldn't have brought you here if I didn't believe this was necessary. What they've discovered about the inhibitor chips." "I know what the chips are for," Cody interrupted. "Behavioral modification. preventing clone madness and aggressive tendencies. The Kaminoans explained this when we were commissioned. They lied. Beast's furry fingers danced across holographic displays showing Cody's brain structure in three-dimensional detail. Commander, what you were told was a cover story. The chip in your brain isn't preventing aggression. It's a control mechanism. Watch. Hank highlighted a specific cluster of neural pathways. This connects directly to your motor cortex, your speech centers, and most critically, your decision-making processes. When activated by specific code phrases, it can override your free will entirely. Cody stared at the hologram, his professional soldier's composure cracking slightly. Override free will? No. That's impossible. I've served for years. I've made tactical decisions, saved lives, commanded men. If I was being controlled. You're not being controlled. Yet. Charles Xavier's wheelchair moved closer, his telepathic presence offering reassurance even as his words delivered harsh truth. Commander, I'm a telepath. I can sense thoughts and intentions across vast distances. When I touch your mind, I feel you. Your experiences, your loyalty to General Kenobi, your pride in your service. But I also sense something else. A closed door in your consciousness. A sealed chamber you can't access. And behind that door, Charles's expression was grim. Behind that door is programming that would turn you into a weapon against everything you hold dear. Show me. Cody's voice was steel. If what you're saying is true, show me. Charles's telepathy was delicate but thorough. He guided Cody's consciousness toward that sealed chamber, that locked portion of his mind the Kaminoans had installed alongside genetic memory and tactical training. And when Cody felt it, truly felt the alien presence in his own head, his face went pale. What is that? I can feel something. Orders. But they're not my thoughts. The commander's breathing accelerated. They're waiting. Ready to activate. And I can't access them. Can't even know what they'll make me do. Order 66, Beast said quietly. Execute all Jedi for treason against the Republic. When that order is given by the Supreme Chancellor, your chip will activate. Your body will move without your consent. You'll turn your blaster on General Kenobi and fire. And you won't be able to stop yourself. The horror on Cody's face was absolute. No. I would never. Obi-Wan is my friend. My general. I've fought beside him for years. I'd die before betraying him. You wouldn't have a choice, Obi-Wan said softly, his own voice thick with emotion. That's why we're here, old friend. To give you back your choice. To remove the control chip before it can be used against you. Cody looked between the Jedi Master and the X-Men, his mind racing through implications. Finally, he nodded. Do it. If there's any chance I could be used to harm my general, my brothers, the Jedi, remove it. I don't care if it's against regulations. Some things are more important than orders. Beast worked quickly, his surgical skills enhanced by technology far beyond Earth's but adapted to his needs through brilliance and improvisation. Storm stood watch at the entrance, her weather senses alert for any disturbance in the temple's atmospheric patterns. Wolverine prowled the perimeter, his enhanced senses cataloging every sound and scent, ready to defend their operation from interruption. And Cyclops coordinated communications, ensuring the Jedi fighting above had no reason to investigate the lower levels. The surgery took 47 minutes. When Beast finally extracted the inhibitor chip, a device no larger than a grain of rice but containing sophisticated biotechnology, Cody stared at it with a mixture of rage and relief. That was in my head. Controlling me. Waiting to turn me into a puppet. The commander's hands clenched into fists. How many of my brothers have this? How many clones are walking time bombs? All of them, Jean said gently. Every clone trooper in the Grand Army of the Republic has an identical chip. And all of them are vulnerable to the same command codes. Then we remove them. All of them. Cody sat up despite Beast's protests about needing rest. I need to contact my unit. Captain Rex, Commander Wolf, Commander Bly, every officer I trust. We need to spread the word, start removing chips immediately. It's not that simple, Charles said. If we move too quickly, Palpatine will realize we've discovered his conspiracy. He might activate Order 66 prematurely, before we can protect even a fraction of the Jedi Order. We need to be strategic. Selective. Build a network slowly. How slowly? Cody demanded. How many Jedi do we risk while we play politics with their lives? As few as possible, Obi-Wan answered. But Commander, the Professor is right. If we alert the entire clone army at once, word will reach the Supreme Chancellor within hours. We need trusted officers. Men who can keep secrets and understand the stakes. Can you identify them? Cody's tactical mind was already working. Yes. There are officers throughout the Republic military who've served long enough to develop independent thinking. The Kaminoans tried to breed it out of us, but personality bleeds through eventually. Rex is the obvious choice, he's always questioned orders that didn't make sense. Wolf survived Ventress's massacre of his unit, he understands betrayal. Bly serves under General Secura, their bond is strong enough that he'd believe this. Gregor is too unconventional to follow blind orders. And Hauser, Cody smiled slightly. Hauser always had a habit of thinking like a free man rather than a programmed soldier. Then those are our targets, Cyclops said, updating a tactical display with clone commander locations. We bring them in one by one, explain the situation, offer them the same choice you had. Build trust. Build a network of freed clones who can warn their Jedi when the order comes. Above them, the temple shook as a Separatist vulture droid crashed into the upper levels. Explosions echoed through stone corridors that had stood for thousands of years. The battle was intensifying, and every Jedi in the temple was being pulled into defensive positions. Rogue appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. Y'all need to see this. Storm detected something on the atmospheric sensors. The Separatist assault ain't random, they're specifically targeting the Senate building. But their approach vectors are weird. Almost like they're herding Republic forces away from the temple itself. Why would they do that? Beast wondered aloud. The temple is full of Jedi. Strategically, it's a far more valuable target than the Senate. Unless someone wants the Jedi scattered and distracted, Magneto said, entering the chamber with his cape smoking from near misses during his journey through the battle-torn temple. While we're defending the Senate, we're not investigating what's really happening. Classic misdirection. Charles's telepathy expanded outward, touching minds across the capital world. What he found made his blood run cold. The Senate building isn't the real target. It's a diversion. The real assault is happening in the industrial district. Separatist forces are hitting Republic clone production facilities, genetic storage banks, and, his eyes widened. They're after the clone genetic templates. The original Jango-fed DNA samples. Why? Obi-Wan asked urgently. The war is almost won. The Republic is pushing the Separatists back on every front. Why risk a major assault for genetic samples? Because Palpatine is preparing for the endgame, Beast said, pieces clicking into place. If we're removing inhibitor chips, he needs a new clone army. One we haven't compromised. By destroying the current genetic templates and capturing them himself, he can create a second generation of clones under complete Sith control. The Republic loses its army. Palpatine rebuilds it under his direct authority. And when he eventually reveals himself as Emperor, he has a military force that answers only to him, Magneto finished. Brilliant and ruthless. I almost admire the efficiency. We need to stop this, Anakin's voice crackled over Obi-Wan's comlink. Master, General Grievous himself is leading the assault on the genetic repositories. If we lose those templates, the Republic can't replace losses. We'll be vulnerable for years. Obi-Wan looked at Cody, then at the X-Men. Commander, you're barely recovered from surgery. But I need every soldier I can trust. Can you fight? Cody stood, testing his balance. Without the inhibitor chip, he felt different. Clearer. Like a fog he'd never known was there had lifted from his thoughts. I'm always ready to fight, General. Especially now that I know I'm fighting for the right reasons. Then we divide our forces, Cyclops said, his tactical training taking over. Jedi defend the Senate, keep up appearances. But we hit the genetic repositories with a strike team. Fast, surgical, and with enough power to stop Grievous before he can escape with those templates. I'm going, Wolverine said flatly. This Grievous guy sounds like my kind of fight. Plus, I got a score to settle with anyone who thinks controlling soldiers through brain chips is acceptable. Storm moved to join him. As am I. If this battle turns the tide of your war, then we must ensure it turns in favor of freedom, not tyranny. I'll stay here and continue the procedures, Beast said. Commander Cody, you mentioned other officers who might be receptive. If we can bring even a few more in during the battle while everyone's distracted, we'll expand our network significantly. Jean nodded. I'll help Hank. My telekinesis makes the surgery faster and safer. Professor, you should coordinate with the Jedi Council. They need to know what's really happening. Charles agreed, though part of him wanted to be in the thick of battle where his telepathy could provide tactical advantages. But leadership sometimes meant directing from the rear. Eric, I assume you're going with the strike team. Magneto's smile was predatory. Oh yes. I've been wanting to test my abilities against this galaxy's technology in real combat conditions. And a cyborg general who commands an army of droids? He's essentially given me an arsenal to work with. Obi-Wan activated his comlink. Anakin, I'm bringing reinforcements. Unconventional reinforcements. Tell General Windu to expect unusual allies. More unusual than Wookiees. Anakin's voice carried the sounds of lightsaber combat in the background. Considerably more, Obi-Wan said dryly. Also, tell him that if he sees metal objects moving of their own accord, it's friendly fire. Relatively speaking. They moved quickly. Cody rallied a squad of clone troopers he trusted implicitly, men who'd served long enough to develop personalities beyond their programming. Obi-Wan led them through temple corridors that were rapidly becoming a war zone as Separatist forces pushed deeper into Coruscant's defensive perimeter. And the X-Men moved with the practiced efficiency of a team that had fought together for years, their powers complementing each other in ways that made even experienced Jedi stop and stare. Storm took point, generating localized fog banks that concealed their approach while her lightning provided suppressing fire against droid patrols. Wolverine became a living weapon, his adamantium claws shearing through battle droid armor like it was paper while his healing factor absorbed blaster bolts that would have killed any normal soldier. Magneto turned every droid they encountered into ammunition, ripping them apart and flinging the pieces at their companions with devastating precision. And Cyclops coordinated it all, his tactical visor measuring angles and distances while his optic blasts carved paths through enemy formations. The clones watched in amazement as this team of mutants fought with powers that made the Force seem almost quaint by comparison. They reached the genetic repository to find it already under siege. General Grievous himself commanded the assault, a towering figure of metal and organic matter, for arms each wielding stolen lightsabers with terrible skill. Around him, super battle droids and droidekas poured blaster fire into Republic defensive positions while Grievous personally dismantled any Jedi brave or foolish enough to engage him. That's our target? Wolverine asked, watching Grievous slice through 3 clone troopers with casual contempt. That's General Grievous, Obi-Wan confirmed. He's killed dozens of Jedi. He's fast, ruthless, and his cyborg body makes him nearly impossible to kill through conventional means. Logan's claws extended with a familiar snikt. Good thing I ain't conventional. Magneto studied the battlefield with a tactician's eye. He's mostly metal. Cybernetic limbs, armor plating, weapon systems. He's essentially handed me complete control over his body. Eric's hands rose, and across the plaza, every loose piece of metal began to vibrate. Shall we introduce ourselves? The X-Men hit the Separatist forces like a hammer. Storm's lightning arced from the sky, overloading droid circuits and creating chaos in their formations. Cyclops' optic blasts carved through Droideca's shields with surgical precision. And Magneto simply reached out with his powers and turned the entire Separatist army against itself. Battle droids fired on each other as their weapons twisted in their hands. Super battle droids tore themselves apart as their internal mechanisms reversed operation. Droidecas rolled helplessly as Magneto inverted their shield generators. And when General Grievous tried to advance, he found his own cybernetic body betraying him. What is this? Grievous' vocabulator crackled with confusion and rage as his limbs locked up, his lightsabers dropping from suddenly immobile hands. This isn't the Force. What are you? Magneto walked calmly across the battlefield, every weapon and droid parting before him like water. I am Magneto. Master of magnetism. Controller of all metal. And you, General, are approximately 70% metal. He made a twisting gesture, and Grievous' cybernetic body contorted into a position that would have been agonizing if he still had organic nerves. Which means you're my puppet now. Wolverine appeared beside Magneto, claws gleaming. Nice trick. But I prefer a more direct approach. Before anyone could stop him, Logan lunged at Grievous and drove his adamantium claws directly through the General's armored chest plate, piercing the organic organs that kept the cyborg alive. Grievous coughed, greenish blood leaking from his vocabulator. You're not Jedi. What manner of beings? We're mutants, Logan growled, withdrawing his claws and letting the mortally wounded General collapse. And in our galaxy, we don't play nice with slavers and tyrants. Message received. Around them, the Separatist assault faltered as their commander fell. Clone troopers rallied, pushing back droid forces that suddenly lacked coordination. And standing in the center of the carnage, the X-Men had just demonstrated something that would echo across the galaxy. There were powers in the universe the Sith had never anticipated. Obi-Wan stared at Grievous' fallen form, then at Wolverine. You killed him. Just like that. No trial, no capture, no attempt at peaceful resolution. He was killing your people, Logan said flatly. And from what I've seen, this galaxy's courts ain't exactly functional right now. Sometimes you gotta do what's necessary, not what's pretty. Before Obi-Wan could respond, Charles Xavier's telepathic voice touched every mind present. The genetic templates are secure. But Masters, we have a problem. I'm sensing massive movements in the Senate building. Palpatine is making his move. Whatever he's planning, it's happening now. And across Coruscant, in the Supreme Chancellor's private office, Darth Sidious smiled behind the mask of Palpatine's grandfatherly face. The X-Men had performed exactly as he'd calculated. They'd revealed their powers. Demonstrated their threat to his plans. And now, with impeccable timing, he could spring the trap he'd been preparing since the moment they'd arrived in his galaxy. Order 66 wasn't his only contingency. And mutants, for all their power, were about to learn that the Sith had spent a millennium planning for every possible opposition. The real battle was about to begin. The Senate Rotunda was a masterpiece of Republic architecture, a vast circular chamber where 1,000 platforms floated on repulsor lifts, each carrying senators representing entire star systems. Today, those platforms were packed with frightened politicians demanding answers, protection, and leadership in the face of the Separatist assault. And at the center of it all, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine stood before the assembled government with a face full of carefully constructed anguish. Charles Xavier felt the deception from across the city. His telepathy painted a vivid picture of Palpatine's performance, the false concern, the manufactured fear, the predatory patience beneath it all. The Sith Lord was about to make his final move, and the X-Men were running out of time to stop it. "We need to get to the Senate building," Charles projected to his team. "Now. Before Palpatine consolidates his power beyond any hope of opposition." But they were still dealing with the aftermath of the genetic repository battle. Clone medics were treating wounded soldiers. Jedi were securing Separatist prisoners. And General Grievous' death, executed by Wolverine without trial or hesitation, had created a political complication that Obi-Wan was struggling to manage. "Professor, we can't simply burst into the Senate chamber," Obi-Wan argued. "There are protocols, security procedures. And after what just happened with Grievous, the clones are looking at your people with considerable suspicion. Killing an enemy commander in cold blood was necessary," Cyclops interrupted. "That cyborg had killed how many of your Jedi? How many clone troopers? Sometimes surgical removal of a threat is the most ethical option available." Spoken like a soldier, Mace Windu said, having arrived at the repository with Jedi reinforcements. The dark-skinned master looked haggard, his robes scorched from combat. "But we are not soldiers. We are peacekeepers. Guardians. There is a difference." "Yeah," Wolverine said, cleaning Grievous' blood from his claws. "The difference is you got the luxury of philosophy while people are dying. We don't." The tension between the Jedi and X-Men was reaching a breaking point. Different cultures, different methods, different moral frameworks, all grinding against each other while the true enemy prepared his endgame. Storm placed a calming hand on Wolverine's shoulder. "Logan, this is not the time. Masters, we understand your concerns. But Professor Xavier's telepathy has detected something critical happening in the Senate. Whatever philosophical differences we have can be resolved after we prevent catastrophe." Before anyone could respond, every clone trooper in the vicinity suddenly stopped. Their movements became mechanical, synchronized. And their weapons slowly turned toward the Jedi. "No," Obi-Wan breathed. "Not yet. We're not ready." But Order 66 hadn't been activated. At least, not fully. Charles sensed the inhibitor chips activating, the control protocols engaging, but something was interfering. The clones' movements were sluggish, fighting against their own programming. And several, including Commander Cody, were standing perfectly still, their faces twisted with concentration as they resisted. "The chips," Beast said urgently. "The ones we removed are providing a buffer. The freed clones are creating psychic resistance through their proximity to the controlled ones. It's buying us seconds at most." Jean Grey's telekinesis erupted outward, freezing every blaster barrel in place before they could fire. "I've got them." "But Professor, there are millions of clones across the galaxy. I can't hold them all." Charles's telepathy expanded to its absolute limit, touching minds across Coruscant and beyond. What he sensed made him gasp. It's not a full activation. Palpatine is testing the system. Seeing how we respond. He knows we've been removing chips, so he's probing our defenses, learning our capabilities before committing to his final move. "Then we end this now," Magneto said coldly. "We go to the Senate, we expose Palpatine, and we kill him before he can activate the full order. Simple. Direct. Effective. And politically disastrous," Mace Windu countered. "If we assassinate the Supreme Chancellor without irrefutable proof, we become the villains. The Republic would turn against the Jedi Order. We'd be branded traitors, hunted across the galaxy. You'll be hunted anyway once Order 66 fully activates." Eric's patience finally snapped. "You're so concerned with political niceties that you can't see you're already doomed. This Republic you serve is a corpse. It died years ago when you let a Sith Lord take control. All that's left is the funeral." Charles placed a mental hand on Eric's consciousness, projecting calm. "Eric, enough. Master Windu, we need a plan that both exposes Palpatine and provides legal justification for action against him. Can we get him to reveal himself willingly? How? Shakti asked. He's maintained his cover for years. What could possibly make him drop it now? Cyclops had been studying tactical displays, analyzing the battle patterns and political maneuvering. He's already dropping it. Look at the timing. The Separatist assault coincides with his emergency Senate session. Grievous' attack on the genetic repositories happens exactly when Jedi forces are divided. And now, a partial activation of Order 66 while we're scrambling to respond. He's not being cautious anymore. He's orchestrating a crescendo. Because he thinks he's won, Jean realized. We've been so focused on stopping him that we haven't considered, what if he wants to be discovered? What if revealing himself as a Sith Lord is part of the plan? Beast's analytical mind seized on the logic. Of course. If he reveals himself in a controlled manner, frames the Jedi as the attackers, positions himself as the victim defending the Republic from a corrupt religious order, Hank's face paled behind his fur. He transforms from Chancellor to Emperor with popular support. The Jedi become enemies of the state. And Order 66 becomes justified as self-defense rather than genocide. The pieces were falling into place with terrible clarity. Palpatine wasn't trying to hide anymore. He was preparing to emerge from the shadows in a way that would make him a hero to the Republic and a martyr if opposed. We need to flip the script, Rogue said suddenly. All eyes turned to the young mutant, who looked uncomfortable with the attention but pressed on. Back home, we dealt with folks who tried to frame mutants as the bad guys all the time. The trick ain't proving they're evil, it's showing the truth before they can spin the narrative. We need to expose Palpatine publicly, dramatically, and in a way that makes it impossible for him to claim victimhood. A trap, Obi-Wan said slowly. We create a situation where he has no choice but to reveal his Sith nature. But how? He's surrounded by guards, protected by layers of political and physical security. Even if we could reach him, he'd simply claim we were assassins. Unless we make him act first, Charles said, his telepathy already formulating a plan. What if we give him exactly what he wants? A threat so significant that he must use his Sith powers to eliminate it. But we do so publicly, with witnesses, in a context where his actions can't be explained away as self-defense. Magneto smiled slowly. You want to bait him into attacking first. In front of the entire Senate. Where thousands would witness a Sith Lord dropping his disguise to murder perceived threats. It's insanely dangerous, Mace Windu said. If he's as powerful as we suspect, he could kill dozens before anyone could stop him. Then we make sure we can stop him, Storm said. Her white eyes crackled with barely contained lightning. Professor, if we coordinate properly, Jedi and X-Men working together, could we contain a Sith Lord long enough for the truth to become undeniable? Charles considered the question carefully. Palpatine's mental shields were unlike anything he'd encountered. Layers upon layers of dark side energy, centuries of Sith training, and a will forged in darkness. But the X-Men had faced impossible odds before. Apocalypse. The Phoenix. Onslaught. They'd survived because they fought together, each mutant's abilities complementing the others. Yes, Charles said finally. But it requires perfect coordination and acceptance of significant risk. Some of us may not survive if Palpatine unleashes his full power. Been there, done that, Wolverine said with dark humor. Died more times than I can count. What's one more? This isn't a joke, Logan, Jean said softly. If we fail, the Jedi Order falls. The Republic becomes an empire. And billions die in the tyranny that follows. Then we don't fail, Cyclops said with absolute certainty. We've saved our world. We can save this galaxy. But we need the Jedi to trust us. To truly work with us, not just tolerate us. Master Yoda, can you accept that mutants and Jedi might accomplish together what neither could alone? The ancient Jedi Master had been silent throughout the discussion, his large eyes closed in meditation. Now he opened them, and in their depths was a decision that would reshape galactic history. Trust you, I do. Work together, we must. But understand, you should, betray us, if you do, pursuit across the galaxy will be eternal. Protect the innocent, we Jedi always will. Even from well-meaning mutants who lose their way. It was both acceptance and warning. Charles nodded respectfully. Understood, Master. Now, let's discuss how we force a Sith Lord into the open. 20 minutes later, Charles Xavier's wheelchair moved through the Senate Rotunda's corridors with an escort that would have been impossible days ago. Jedi Masters Windu and Yoda flanked him. Behind them came the X-Men, Storm and Jean projecting calm authority, Cyclops and Wolverine ready for violence, Magneto radiating barely contained power. And surrounding them all, a contingent of clone troopers led by Commander Cody, their inhibitor chips removed and their loyalty finally their own choice. They were going to interrupt the Senate session. Going to publicly confront the Supreme Chancellor. And if Charles's plan worked, they would force Palpatine to reveal himself before he could fully consolidate power. If the plan failed, they'd all be dead within minutes. The Senate chamber doors opened at Mace Windu's force command, interrupting Palpatine mid-speech. The Chancellor had been addressing the assembled senators about emergency measures, expanded executive powers, and the ongoing Separatist threat. His face showed surprise at the interruption, perfectly acted surprise that didn't fool Charles's telepathy for a second. Master Windu, Palpatine said with just the right amount of confusion and concern. This is highly irregular. The Senate is in session. Whatever the Jedi Council needs can surely wait until... No, Chancellor, it cannot. Mace Windu's voice carried across the vast chamber, amplified by the acoustics and by the Force itself. We have discovered a plot against the Republic. A conspiracy that reaches to the highest levels of government. And we believe you, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, are at its center. The Senate erupted in shock and outrage. Senators shouted accusations of treason against the Jedi. Security forces moved to intercept the intruders. And Palpatine's face showed exactly the right amount of hurt betrayal, while his mental signature radiated satisfaction. He'd been waiting for this. Wanted this. The Jedi publicly accusing him of treason would justify everything that came next. But Charles Xavier had one more card to play. Chancellor Palpatine, Charles said, his telepathic voice touching every mind in the chamber, senators, guards, Jedi, X-Men, and Palpatine himself. I am Professor Charles Xavier, a telepath from beyond your galaxy. My abilities allow me to sense thoughts and intentions with perfect clarity. And I'm going to show this entire Senate exactly what you are. Palpatine's mask slipped for just a fraction of a second. His yellow Sith eyes flickered briefly behind the grandfatherly disguise. I don't know what you think you're doing, Professor, but telepathy is not admissible as evidence in Republic law. Whatever you claim to sense. I'm not claiming anything, Charles interrupted. I'm showing them. And he did. Charles Xavier's Omega-level telepathy, amplified by Jean Grey's power and focused with surgical precision, projected Palpatine's true thoughts directly into the minds of every being in the Senate chamber. They saw Darth Sidious. They felt the dark side's corruption. They experienced fragments of memory, ordering Order 66's creation, orchestrating the Clone Wars, manipulating both sides for his eventual ascension to absolute power. The Senate saw, felt, and understood exactly what their beloved Chancellor truly was. For 3 perfect seconds, the truth was undeniable. Then Palpatine stopped pretending. The lightning came first, Sith lightning that erupted from Palpatine's hands with the force of a star's fury. It struck Charles directly, and only Jean's telekinetic shield prevented instant death. The wheelchair's metal frame superheated and melted. Charles screamed as dark side energy seared through his telepathic defenses. But the trap had been sprung. The Senate had seen. And now Palpatine stood revealed, his face twisted with Sith hatred, his eyes burning yellow, his voice no longer grandfatherly but filled with ancient malevolence. Foolish Jedi, Darth Sidious snarled. Foolish mutants. You think exposing me changes anything? I am the Senate. I am the Republic. And you, more lightning erupted, this time directed at Mace Windu. Are all dead men? X-Men, Cyclops shouted. Execute Plan Delta. They'd trained for this during their brief planning session. Each mutant knew their role, their timing, their absolute necessity to the plan's success. Storm raised her hands and the Senate Rotunda's atmosphere went insane. Hurricane-force winds tore through the chamber, disrupting Sidious's lightning and scattering his attacks. Rain fell in torrents despite the indoor setting, Storm pulling moisture from every available source and transforming the battlefield into a tempest. Magneto ripped every piece of metal in the chamber free, security railings, platform supports, even the ceremonial fixtures, and formed them into a cage around Sidious. Contain him. Eric shouted. Don't let him reach the senators. Jean's telekinesis reinforced the cage while simultaneously protecting Charles, who was barely conscious from the Sith lightning's assault. Cyclops' optic blasts carved through Sidious's dark side defenses, forcing the Sith Lord to divide his attention between multiple superhuman threats. And Wolverine simply charged, claws extended. With the singular purpose of killing a Sith Lord the old-fashioned way. But Darth Sidious hadn't ruled the Sith for decades by being easy to kill. His force powers erupted with apocalyptic fury, platforms ripped from their moorings and hurled as weapons, senators used as shields, lightning arcing in all directions simultaneously. The Jedi moved to protect the innocent, their lightsabers deflecting attacks that would have killed hundreds. You cannot win, Sidious laughed, his voice carrying over the chaos. I've planned for millennia. The Sith are eternal. Your pathetic powers. Rogue's gloved hand touched his face. She'd been waiting for the moment. Waiting for Sidious to be distracted by flashier attacks. And when his guard dropped for just 1 second, she made contact. Her mutation activated. Power flowed from Sidious into Rogue, dark side energy, Sith knowledge, and the terrible awareness of 1,000 years of evil. She screamed as it flooded her consciousness, but she held on. Held on and drained the Sith Lord's strength while his own powers turned against him. No. Sidious's voice cracked with genuine fear for the first time. What are you? What is this mutation that can? Mace Windu's lightsaber removed Darth Sidious's head. The body fell. The Senate sat in stunned silence. And across the galaxy, the contingency orders programmed into millions of clone troopers simply stopped. Without Palpatine to activate them, Order 66 remained dormant. Rogue collapsed, unconscious from the psychic backlash. Jean caught her telekinetically while Beast rushed to assess the damage. Charles Xavier slumped in his ruined wheelchair, his mind still reeling from direct contact with Sith power. And the Senate, the Republic, faced a truth they could no longer deny. Their Chancellor had been a monster. The Jedi had been right. And mutants from another galaxy had helped save them from tyranny they hadn't even known existed. Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan was the first to speak. Is it over? Is the threat truly ended? Yoda leaned heavily on his walking stick, suddenly looking every one of his 900 years. Ended, one threat is. But begun, many questions have. Reorganize the Republic, we must. And these mutants, he looked at the X-Men with something like respect. Allies they have proven themselves to be. Welcome in this galaxy, they are. But as medics rushed to help the wounded and senators began the impossible task of reforming their government, Charles Xavier's telepathy sensed something that filled him with deep unease. The darkness was gone. Palpatine was dead. But the damage the Sith Lord had done to the Republic, the clone army, and the galactic balance of power, that would take years to repair, if it could be repaired at all. And somewhere in the Force, Yoda felt it too. A disturbance. A warning. The battle was won, but the war for the galaxy's soul was only beginning. The medical bay in the Jedi Temple had become a refuge for heroes and victims alike. Charles Xavier lay in a specialized healing tank, his body recovering from Sith lightning that had nearly stopped his heart. Rogue remained in a coma-like state, her mind struggling to process the dark side knowledge she'd absorbed from Palpatine. Beast worked tirelessly alongside Jedi healers, trying to purge the Sith corruption before it permanently damaged her psyche. And across the galaxy, millions of clone troopers were waking up to the horrifying knowledge of what they'd almost been forced to do. Jean Grey sat beside Rogue's bed, her hand hovering just above the young mutant's forehead. Her telepathy carefully sifted through the darkness Rogue had absorbed, isolating Sith memories from Rogue's own consciousness like separating poison from blood. It was exhausting, dangerous work. One wrong move and Jean might become contaminated herself. But she'd made a promise to protect her team, and she would keep it regardless of cost. "How is she?" Scott asked quietly, entering with 2 cups of CAF, the galaxy's equivalent to coffee, and nearly as essential to soldiers everywhere. "Stable," Jean replied, accepting the cup gratefully. "But Scott, what she absorbed, it's not just power or knowledge. It's malevolence given form. Centuries of Sith philosophy compressed into her consciousness. She's experiencing every atrocity Palpatine ever committed, every manipulation, every life destroyed. And part of her mind is trying to justify it all. Can you save her?" "I have to." Jean's green eyes showed determination that had carried her through impossible challenges. "Rogue is stronger than she knows. She's spent her entire life absorbing others' powers and memories without losing herself. This is just a particularly toxic version of what she's always done." Across the medical bay, Wolverine paced like a caged animal. His healing factor had already repaired the blaster burns and impact wounds from the Senate battle, but psychological damage took longer to heal. He'd killed General Grievous without hesitation, cut down battle droids by the dozens, and nearly gotten to Palpatine before Rogue made her sacrifice play. Logan understood necessary violence, but he also understood that every kill left a mark, and this galaxy's war had already marked him deeply. "You should rest," Storm said, materializing from the shadows where she'd been standing vigil. The weather goddess looked exhausted, her white hair lank and her eyes showing the strain of maintaining the atmospheric assault that had helped contain Sidious. "The battle is won, Logan. You can stop fighting for a few hours." "Can I?" Wolverine gestured toward the wider temple, where clone troopers were being processed by the thousands. "Those soldiers out there just learned they were programmed to murder their friends. The Republic's leaderless. The Separatists are in chaos without Dooku and Grievous. And we're stuck in a galaxy we don't belong in, with no idea how to get home. When exactly do I get to rest, Ro?" Storm had no answer. Because Logan was right, victory had come at a cost they were only beginning to understand. In the Jedi Council chambers, the political aftermath was being decided. Bail Organa represented the Senate alongside Mon Mothma of Chandrila and several other moderate senators who'd survived Palpatine's purges. Across from them sat the Jedi Council, reduced in number but still formidable. And between them stood Magneto, representing the X-Men in Charles's absence. "The question before us is simple," Bail Organa said, his diplomatic voice carrying weight earned through decades of service. "What do we do now?" The Clone Wars were orchestrated by a Sith Lord who controlled both sides. The Separatists are leaderless, their cause revealed as manufactured conflict. The Republic has no chancellor, our military is compromised by inhibitor chips, and public trust in government has collapsed. How do we rebuild? End the war, Magneto said bluntly. Immediately. Offer amnesty to Separatist systems that were manipulated into rebellion. Remove the inhibitor chips from every clone trooper and give them choice about continued service. Dismantle the emergency powers that Palpatine accumulated. And most importantly, ensure the Jedi Order never again becomes the Republic's military arm. Mace Windu's jaw tightened. You presume much, Magneto. The Jedi have served the Republic for thousands of years. And in the process, you became tools of its corruption, Eric countered. Look at yourselves, masters. You're generals now, not peacekeepers. You command armies and make strategic decisions about planetary bombardments. You've strayed so far from your original purpose that a Sith Lord operated under your noses for years. Perhaps it's time to return to your roots, or admit you've become something else entirely. Yoda's ears drooped sadly. Harsh his words are. But truth, they contain. Lost our way, the Jedi have. Seduced by power and responsibility, we were. Believed ourselves indispensable to the Republic's survival. Forgot that serve, we should, not rule. Then what do you propose? Mon Mothma asked. If the Jedi withdraw from military leadership, who commands the clone army? Who defends against remaining Separatist forces? The clones command themselves, Commander Cody said, entering the chamber with several other clone officers whose inhibitor chips had been removed. We were bred to be soldiers, but we're also sentient beings capable of independent thought. Give us the choice. Many of us will continue serving, but as free citizens of the Republic, not programmed slaves. And the Jedi? Bail Organa looked at Mace Windu. Will you accept a return to your traditional role? Advisors and mediators rather than generals? Windu exchanged glances with his fellow council members. The decision was painful, admitting failure, accepting limitation, releasing power they'd grown accustomed to wielding. But Yoda was right. The path they'd walked had led to near extinction. Perhaps it was time to try a different way. We will, Mace Windu said finally. The Jedi Order will withdraw from military command effective immediately. We'll assist in the transition, help remove inhibitor chips, and offer guidance to senators who request it. But we will no longer lead armies or make strategic military decisions. That responsibility belongs to the Republic's citizens and their elected representatives. And the Separatist systems? Magneto pressed. Will you accept their return to the Republic, or demand punishment for manufactured treason? We offer peace, Mon Mothma said firmly. Not all Separatists were manipulated, some had legitimate grievances about Republic corruption and representation. We address those grievances through reform, not through continued war. The Clone Wars end today. It was a radical shift. A complete reimagining of galactic politics. And it was happening because mutants from another reality had forced the Republic to confront truths it had been avoiding for decades. 3 days later, Charles Xavier finally regained consciousness. His body was still weak, his telepathy recovering from the psychic assault of channeling Palpatine's thoughts to the entire Senate. But his mind was clear, and what he sensed through the force-touched atmosphere of Coruscant brought him profound relief. The war is ending, he said to Jean, who'd barely left his side. I can feel it. The fighting is stopping across 1,000 systems. Ships powering down. Soldiers laying down weapons. It's not perfect, there will be holdouts and rogue factions, but the great machine of war is grinding to a halt. Because you forced Palpatine into the open, Jean replied. Because the X-Men gave the Jedi the push they needed to act. Professor, you saved this galaxy. We saved it, Charles corrected gently. All of us. Mutants and Jedi together. Though I wonder, his telepathy reached out carefully, touching the unique energy signature of the Force. I wonder if we've changed something fundamental about this reality. The Force feels different now. More open. As though it's acknowledging possibilities beyond its traditional binary of light and dark. Beast entered the medical bay, datapad in hand and his furry face showing the exhaustion of 72 hours without sleep. Professor, I've been analyzing the dimensional barriers that brought us here. I believe I understand now what happened. The Phoenix Force, or rather, a fragment of it that was dormant in Jean, reacted to a cosmic phenomenon in this galaxy called the World Between Worlds. It's a nexus point in the Force, a place outside normal space and time. When the two energies interacted, he pulled up complex equations that made Charles's head hurt. We were pulled across dimensional boundaries and deposited here. It should have been impossible. But the Phoenix Force specializes in the impossible. Can we reverse it? Jean asked, though Charles detected reluctance in her thoughts. Can we go home? Theoretically, yes. If we can access the world between worlds again, and if the Phoenix Force fragment is willing to cooperate, we might be able to create a return pathway. Beast hesitated. But Professor, I have to ask, should we? Charles studied his brilliant colleague. What do you mean? Look at what we've accomplished here. We exposed a millennia-old conspiracy. We prevented a genocide. We helped end a galactic war. And in doing so, we've demonstrated that the Force isn't the only source of extraordinary ability in the universe. We've opened this galaxy's collective consciousness to possibilities they never imagined. Hank's eyes gleamed behind his glasses. We could stay. Help them rebuild. Ensure the mistakes of the past aren't repeated. Perhaps our presence here wasn't an accident but a purpose. Or perhaps we're interfering in a destiny that isn't ours to shape, Magneto said, entering the medical bay with his usual dramatic timing. Charles, I've been thinking about this as well. These people have the Force, a mystical energy that connects all living things. Back home, we have mutation, genetic evolution granting extraordinary abilities. What if these aren't separate phenomena but different expressions of the same underlying principle? What if we're not from different universes but different iterations of the same universe at different stages of development? Charles hadn't considered that possibility. His telepathy reached out, touching the Force carefully, comparing it to the genetic signatures that defined mutant abilities. There were similarities. Connections. Patterns that suggested something. You're suggesting we're from this galaxy's future, Charles said slowly. That mutants are what Force sensitives evolve into, given enough time. Or vice versa, Magneto replied. Perhaps the Force is what humanity develops after mutants go extinct. Perhaps we're seeing our own past or future, depending on perspective. Either way, the question remains, do we stay and influence this galaxy's development, or do we return home and leave them to their own evolution? Before Charles could respond, Yoda entered the medical bay with Obi-Wan and Anakin. The ancient Jedi Master looked different somehow, lighter, despite the weight of recent events. As though a burden he'd carried for decades had finally been lifted. A question for you, I have, Yoda said, settling onto a cushion with a sigh. Return to your home, can you? But stay, would you consider? Much you have taught us. Much more, you could teach. And in return, the Force's mysteries, we could share. An exchange of knowledge, between your mutants and our Jedi. Beneficial to both, this could be. Charles looked at his X-Men, Jean and Scott standing together, Beast with his analytical mind already considering the scientific implications, Storm by the window longing for open skies, Wolverine's gruff exterior hiding deep loyalty, Magneto's complex mixture of hope and cynicism. And Rogue, still unconscious but fighting to reclaim herself from the darkness she'd absorbed to save them all. I need to discuss this with my team, Charles said carefully. This isn't my decision alone. We came here by accident, but leaving, that's a choice each of us must make individually. Understood, Obi-Wan said. But Professor, whatever you decide, know that you'll always have allies in this galaxy. The Jedi Order owes you a debt we can never fully repay. You reminded us what we should be, servants of the Force, not masters of armies. That lesson alone justifies your entire presence here. After the Jedi left, the X-Men gathered around Charles's bed. The question hung heavy in the air, stay or go. Shape this galaxy's future or return to their own problems on Earth? I vote we stay, Beast said immediately. The scientific opportunities alone are incredible. Plus, someone needs to ensure the Republic's reforms actually happen. I don't trust politicians, any galaxy's politicians, to follow through without supervision. I want to go home, Storm said quietly. This place, it's beautiful in its way, but it's not my home. I miss Earth's storms. I miss the sky that knows me. Here, I'm just another Force wielder. There, I'm a goddess who chose to be a hero. That distinction matters. I'll follow the professor, Cyclops said simply. Whatever you decide, Charles, the X-Men stick together. Wolverine snorted. I got no home to go back to besides you people. Earth, Coruscant, doesn't matter much to me. But I gotta say, this galaxy's got problems we understand. Discrimination, persecution, tyrants using fear to control people. Sounds like every Tuesday back home. Might as well fight the good fight here as anywhere. Magneto was silent for a long moment. I've spent my life fighting for mutant supremacy. Believing Homo superior deserves to inherit Earth from Homo sapiens. But here we're truly foreign. Outsiders without history or context. And yet, we've already changed the fate of billions. He looked at Charles with an expression that mixed respect and challenge. Perhaps this is where we belong. Where we can build something new without the baggage of old conflicts. Jean held Scott's hand tightly. I sense the Phoenix Force fragments stirring. It's ready to take us home if we choose. But it's also content to let us stay. For once, the cosmic entity isn't pushing me toward destiny, it's giving me choice. She smiled sadly. That might be the most dangerous gift of all. Charles Xavier closed his eyes and let his telepathy expand across Coruscant, across the Republic, touching minds that were rebuilding, healing, hoping for something better. He sensed clone troopers choosing their own names and futures. He sensed Separatist systems cautiously rejoining the Republic with promises of real representation. He sensed Jedi rediscovering their purpose beyond warfare. And he sensed something else. A darkness that Palpatine had touched but hadn't created. Ancient evil that predated the Sith, sleeping in the unknown regions and waiting for the galaxy's moment of weakness to strike. The war with Palpatine was over. But the galaxy's struggles were far from finished. And if the X-Men left now, who would stand ready when the next threat emerged? We stay, Charles said finally. At least for now. We help stabilize the Republic. We ensure the Jedi's reforms take root. We teach them about mutation and learn about the Force. And when the time comes, when our work here is truly done, then we decide about going home. He looked at each of his team members. But only if you agree. This is not an order. This is a choice we make together. One by one, they nodded. Even Storm, despite her longing for Earth, understood the necessity of their mission. Then it's settled, Magneto said with satisfaction. The X-Men stay in the Star Wars galaxy. I suspect future historians will mark this as the moment everything changed. He had no idea how right he was. 6 months after the fall of Palpatine, the galaxy was still finding its balance. The Jedi Temple had become something unexpected, not just a fortress of Force wielders, but an academy where mutants and Jedi trained side by side, learning to understand powers that operated on fundamentally different principles yet served similar purposes. Charles Xavier's school had always been about coexistence, about proving that those with extraordinary abilities could live peacefully alongside those without. Now that philosophy was being tested on a galactic scale. In the temple's meditation gardens, Storm floated cross-legged above a carefully cultivated pond, her eyes closed and white with power. Around her, clouds formed in miniature, perfect replicas of weather systems that would dwarf continents on most worlds, compressed into a space no larger than a room. Watching her with fascination was Yoda, his ancient face creased in concentration as he tried to understand how mutation could grant such precise control over natural forces without any apparent connection to the Force. The winds answer to you, Yoda observed. Not through the Force, you command them. Through something else. Genetic memory, perhaps. Instinct woven into your very cells. Storm opened her eyes, and the miniature weather systems dissipated like morning fog. It is difficult to explain, Master Yoda. When I was a child in Cairo, trapped beneath rubble after my parents died, I called to the sky without knowing what I was doing. The rain came. The winds answered. I did not learn this power, I awakened it. As though it had been sleeping in my blood, waiting. Similar to the Force, this sounds, Yoda mused. Born with the gift, Force sensitives are. Training shapes it, but present from birth, it is. Perhaps not so different, mutants and Jedi are. Simply different expressions of the same cosmic principle. Or perhaps the universe has more variety than any philosophy can contain, Storm replied gently. Charles believes that mutation and the Force might be related, but I wonder if that matters. Whether our powers come from genetics, midichlorians, or divine blessing, what matters is how we choose to use them. Across the gardens, Wolverine sparred with Anakin Skywalker in a training session that looked more like attempted murder to casual observers. Logan's adamantium claws deflected lightsaber strikes with shower of sparks, his healing factor absorbing burns that would have crippled any normal being. Anakin moved with the grace of a master swordsman, his connection to the Force allowing him to anticipate Logan's attacks with preternatural accuracy. "You're fast, kid," Wolverine grunted, dodging a strike that would have removed his arm. "But you rely too much on that Force of yours. What happens when you face something it can't predict? Like you." Anakin deactivated his lightsaber, breathing hard. "I've been trying to sense your movements through the Force for 20 minutes. It's like you exist in a void. I can feel the space around you, but you yourself are just, absent." "Mutants don't register to Force senses the same way," Beast explained, watching from the sidelines with a datapad full of observations. "We've been studying this phenomenon. Force sensitives perceive living beings through their connection to the universal energy field. But mutants, we exist somewhat outside that framework. Our genetic alterations create a kind of interference pattern. You can sense us indirectly, through our effects on the environment, but directly reading our intentions or future actions is significantly more difficult." Anakin looked troubled. "That's a significant tactical advantage. If there are beings who exist outside the Force's perception, how can Jedi maintain peace? How can we sense danger if we can't sense the dangerous?" "By not relying solely on supernatural senses," Cyclops said, emerging from the temple with a training squadron of clone troopers who'd chosen to continue their military service as free citizens. "By using tactics, technology, intelligence gathering, and good old-fashioned situational awareness. The Force is a powerful tool, Anakin, but treating it as infallible is what allowed Palpatine to operate undetected for years." The young Jedi Knight flinched at the mention of Palpatine. Even months later, the wound was raw, the realization that he'd been groomed by a Sith Lord, manipulated and positioned as a potential apprentice. If the X-Men hadn't intervened, Anakin might have fallen to the dark side. He woke from nightmares about that alternate future regularly. "Scott's right," Obi-Wan said, joining the group with Mace Windu. "The Jedi Order is relearning lessons we should never have forgotten. The Force guides us, but it doesn't make our decisions. That remains our responsibility, and our burden." Mace Windu looked older than he had 6 months ago, the stress of rebuilding a Jedi Order that had nearly destroyed itself showing in every line of his face. "Professor Xavier is waiting in the council chambers. He says it's important." They found Charles in his new hover chair, a significant upgrade from his destroyed wheelchair, incorporating repulsor technology that gave him full mobility in 3 dimensions. Beside him floated holographic displays showing star charts of the galaxy's unknown regions, areas beyond Republic space where few scouts had ventured and fewer had returned. "Thank you for coming," Charles said. "I'm afraid I have troubling news. My telepathy has been expanding its range as I've grown more comfortable with this galaxy's psychic landscape. And recently, I've been sensing something from beyond the galactic rim. Minds that are, wrong. Alien in a way that even this galaxy's diverse species aren't. And their intentions toward the Republic are hostile." "The Yuuzhan Vong," Mace Windu said grimly. "Ancient legends speak of extragalactic invaders who exist outside the Force. Most Jedi dismissed them as myth." "They're not myth," Charles replied. "I can sense them. Billions of minds organized in a rigid hierarchy, completely absent from the Force as Wolverine is, but unlike mutants, they're deliberately void. And they're coming. Not today, not this year, but within a decade or two, they'll reach Republic space. And this galaxy is not prepared. Then we prepare it, Magneto said, entering the chamber with Jean and Rogue. The young Southern mutant had finally recovered from absorbing Palpatine's darkness, though she now carried Sith knowledge that occasionally flickered behind her eyes. She wore long gloves that extended to her elbows, a constant reminder of the power and curse she carried. We build defenses. We establish early warning systems. We train soldiers in combating enemies who can't be sensed through the Force. We also need to address internal threats, Jean added. The Republic's reforms are progressing, but there's resistance. Senators who profited from Palpatine's corruption are quietly sabotaging new anti-slavery legislation. Criminal syndicates are expanding into power vacuums left by Separatist collapse. And there are rumors of dark side cults forming in the Outer Rim, people who saw Palpatine's power and want to claim it for themselves. Commander Cody, now officially General Cody of the Reformed Republic Defense Force, pulled up tactical displays. We've been tracking Separatist holdouts who refuse to accept the war's end. Admiral Trench is still active in the corporate sector. General Kalani's droids continue guerrilla operations on Agamar. And there are whispers of a new faction calling themselves the Confederacy of Free Systems, basically Separatists under a different name. Then we deal with each threat systematically, Cyclops said, his tactical mind already formulating strategies. Yuuzhan Vong are long-term, we establish monitoring stations in the unknown regions and begin defensive preparations. Internal corruption and dark side cults are medium-term, we work with Reformed Republic intelligence to identify and neutralize threats. Separatist holdouts are immediate, we offer them the same amnesty as everyone else, and if they refuse, we demonstrate why continuing to fight is pointless. Quite the to-do list, Wolverine muttered. We came here by accident and now we're basically running the galaxy's security. How'd that happen? Because we're the only ones positioned to do it, Beast said pragmatically. The Jedi are rebuilding their order and rediscovering their purpose. The Republic Senate is fractured and recovering from Palpatine's manipulation. The clone army is transitioning to voluntary service. Nature abhors a vacuum, Logan, so we fill it, at least temporarily, until this galaxy stabilizes. Yoda tapped his walking stick thoughtfully. Temporary, you say. But concerned, I am. Power, once claimed, difficult to release is. Begin as helpers, you did. But leaders, you are becoming. And leadership, to tyranny can lead, if unchecked it remains. Charles met Yoda's ancient gaze with respect. You're right to be concerned, Master. I've seen well-intentioned heroes become dictators when they believed only they could solve the galaxy's problems. That's why we're not claiming authority, we're offering assistance. The Republic makes its own decisions. The Jedi maintain their independence. We simply provide capabilities that currently don't exist in this galaxy. And when those capabilities are no longer needed? Mace Windu asked pointedly. Will you leave? Return to your own galaxy? The question hung heavy in the air. Charles had been avoiding it for months, but now it demanded an answer. I don't know, he admitted. Beast believes he can reopen the dimensional pathway that brought us here. The Phoenix Force fragment in Jean is willing to facilitate our return. But, he looked at his X-Men, the team he trained, protected, and led through countless battles. But we've built lives here. Storm has been working with agricultural worlds to optimize their weather patterns for crop production. Beast has been collaborating with Republic scientists on everything from hyperdrive improvements to medical advances. Logan has been training clone troopers in close-quarters combat that doesn't rely on the Force. Jean and I have been establishing a network of telepaths and empaths to help identify Force-sensitive children before they're exploited by dark side cults. And I, Magneto said with a slight smile, have been ensuring no one tries to build another slave army by controlling every military production facility's metallic infrastructure. If anyone tries to commission another control chip or inhibitor device, I'll know about it instantly. So you're staying, Anakin said. It wasn't quite a question. For now, Charles replied. Until we're confident this galaxy can defend itself. Until the Republic's reforms have taken root. Until the Jedi Order is strong enough to resist future corruption. Until you decide this is your home, Obi-Wan said gently. Professor, you don't need to justify your presence here. You've earned the right to stay or leave as you choose. The question is simply, what do you want? Not what's strategically optimal or politically necessary. What does Charles Xavier, the man rather than the leader, actually want? Charles closed his eyes, his telepathy reaching across Coruscant, across the Republic, touching minds he'd come to know over 6 months of integration. Clone troopers who'd chosen their own names and lives. Senators genuinely trying to reform corrupt systems. Jedi rediscovering the peace and purpose they'd lost. And beings of 1,000 species working together to build something better than what Palpatine had nearly destroyed. I want what I've always wanted, Charles said quietly. A world, or galaxy, where those with extraordinary abilities can coexist peacefully with those without. Where power is tempered by responsibility. Where children can grow up without fear of persecution for being different. I built that dream on Earth, in one school, in one country. But here, his eyes opened, shining with possibility. Here, I could build it across an entire galaxy. Then build it, Yoda said simply. Stay, you will. Help us, you shall. And perhaps, teach us more than powers and tactics. Teach us what truly means, to be a hero without losing yourself to the heroic burden. Storm floated down from her meditation, her white hair billowing in winds only she commanded. Then I will stay as well. This galaxy needs a goddess who chooses to be mortal, someone who has power but uses it to serve rather than rule. I will teach them weather, yes. But more importantly, I will teach them humility. I'm staying too, Wolverine said gruffly. Got too many people here who need killin'. And besides, someone's gotta make sure these Jedi don't get soft now that the war's over. I'll stay, Beast agreed. The scientific opportunities alone justify a lifetime of study. And I've grown rather fond of the clone troopers, they remind me that intelligence and individuality aren't dependent on unique genetics. Even identical DNA can produce unique, valuable people. Cyclops looked at Jean, and their silent communication spoke of decades together. Finally, Scott nodded. We stay. Someone needs to keep this team tactical, and apparently that someone is always me. Jean smiled, her connection to the Phoenix Force creating a brief, beautiful manifestation of fire wings that lit the council chamber. I stay because the Force and the Phoenix have unfinished business. I think I was brought here not by accident but by design, cosmic entities playing a game I don't fully understand. But I'm not their pawn. I'm Jean Grey. And I choose to help this galaxy not because I must, but because I can. Rogue was the last to speak, her gloved hands clasped tightly. I stay because I absorb the Sith Lord's knowledge. I know things about the dark side that could be dangerous if left unchecked. I need the Jedi's help to control this darkness, and they need my help to understand what Palpatine was really planning. We got unfinished business, this galaxy and me. Magneto stood apart from the others, his expression complex. I stay because for the first time in my life, I'm building something rather than destroying what others built. No more Asteroid M, no more brotherhood of evil mutants, no more schemes to establish mutant supremacy. Here, I can create a system that protects the extraordinary without oppressing the ordinary. Charles, you've been trying to reform me for decades. Perhaps this galaxy is where I finally learn the lesson. Charles felt tears prickling his eyes. His team, his family, had chosen to stay. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Because they'd found purpose in a galaxy far from home. Then it settled, Mace Windu said. The X-Men remain as advisors, teachers, and allies to the Republic and Jedi Order. We'll formalize the arrangement with the Senate, establish proper protocols, and ensure your presence is legally recognized. And what do we call you? Anakin asked. You're not Jedi, not Republic military, not senators. What's your official designation? Charles smiled. We're what we've always been. We're X-Men. Champions of the oppressed. Defenders of the innocent. Teachers of those who seek to understand their powers. And now, apparently, we're also legends of a galaxy far, far away. Legends you are indeed, Yoda said with a rare, genuine smile. But remember, legends, dangerous they can be. Inspire, they do. But also, unrealistic expectations, they create. Human, you must remain. Flawed, you must admit to being. Perfect heroes, the galaxy needs not. Honest ones, it desperately requires. We'll do our best, Charles promised. To be honest, flawed, and stubbornly optimistic despite overwhelming evidence that the universe is hostile and uncaring. It's what we do. The council chamber's windows showed Coruscant at sunset, artificial suns creating a beautiful simulation of natural light painting the endless city in gold and crimson. Somewhere out there, a clone trooper was choosing his future. A Force-sensitive child was being found by Jedi who would teach rather than indoctrinate. A senator was voting for reform despite personal cost. And across 1,000 systems, beings of every species were slowly building something better. The Clone Wars were over. The Sith were defeated. But the real work was just beginning, the hard, grinding, unglamorous work of building a just society from the ruins of corruption and tyranny. And standing at the center of it all, a group of mutants from another reality who'd accidentally become exactly what this galaxy needed, heroes who understood that power without wisdom led to tyranny, that victory without justice led to resentment, and that the true measure of a civilization wasn't how it treated its strongest but how it protected its weakest. So, Wolverine said, breaking the philosophical moment with characteristic bluntness. We saving the galaxy. When do we eat? I'm starving. The tension broke. Everyone laughed, Jedi and mutants together, people from different realities united by common purpose. And in that moment, Charles Xavier knew they'd made the right choice. The X-Men belonged here. Not by birth, not by destiny, but by choice. And that made all the difference. As they left the council chamber to celebrate their decision, and yes, to finally eat something, Charles Xavier's telepathy touched something on the edge of his awareness. A presence in the Force he'd never felt before. Not hostile, but curious. Ancient and powerful and interested in the changes the X-Men represented. Somewhere in the galaxy, the daughter watched. The son observed. And the father, the embodiment of the Force's balance, smiled for the first time in millennia. The ones had seen empires rise and fall. They'd witnessed Sith and Jedi battle for dominance. They'd watched the Force's eternal dance between light and dark. But now, something truly new had entered the galaxy. Not Force users. Not Sith. Not Jedi. Mutants. And the galaxy would never be the same. The arrival of the X-Men in the Star Wars galaxy had been an accident of cosmic proportions, a collision between the Phoenix Force and the world between worlds that defied every law of physics and metaphysics. But accidents, Charles Xavier had long believed, were simply opportunities in disguise. In 6 months, they'd accomplished what the Jedi Order couldn't manage in 1,000 years. They'd exposed a Sith conspiracy, ended a galactic war, reformed a corrupt republic, and proven that the Force wasn't the universe's only path to power. More importantly, they'd shown that heroes didn't need to be perfect, they just needed to be present when it mattered most. The clone army was being rebuilt as a force of free citizens rather than programmed slaves. The Jedi Order was rediscovering its purpose as peacekeepers rather than generals. The Republic's Senate was implementing reforms that addressed the legitimate grievances that had spawned the Separatist movement. And across 1,000 worlds, beings who'd been enslaved, oppressed, or marginalized were finding hope in the example of mutants who'd chosen compassion over power. But threats remained. The Yuuzhan Vong still approached from beyond the galactic rim. Dark side cults were forming in the shadows of Palpatine's fall. And the scars of 3 years of brutal warfare would take generations to heal. The X-Men's work was far from finished. Yet as Charles Xavier looked at his team, Storm teaching weather control to agricultural specialists, Beast collaborating with the Republic's brightest scientists, Wolverine training the next generation of soldiers, Jean and Rogue establishing support networks for Force sensitives, Cyclops reforming Republic security protocols, and even Magneto building rather than destroying, he felt something rare for a man who'd spent his life fighting impossible battles. He felt hope. Not the naive hope of someone who believed problems could be easily solved, but the hard-earned hope of someone who'd seen the worst humanity, and mutant kind, had to offer and chosen to believe in better possibilities anyway. The X-Men had crossed dimensional barriers to arrive in a galaxy far, far away. They'd faced Sith Lords and battle droids, survived betrayals and political schemes, and ultimately changed the course of history through courage, sacrifice, and the stubborn refusal to accept that evil must always triumph. They'd come as strangers. They'd stayed as heroes. And they'd become legends in a galaxy that desperately needed to remember what true heroism looked like. The Force had guided the Jedi for millennia. But now, it had competition. Mutation had arrived in the Star Wars galaxy. And the future, uncertain, dangerous, and filled with possibility, belonged to those brave enough to face it together. Professor Charles Xavier smiled, his telepathy touching the minds of his teammates one last time before they dispersed to their respective missions. No words were necessary. They all understood. This was home now. This galaxy, these people, this endless struggle towards something better. And the X-Men would defend it with everything they had.